Hello everyone. I'm glad to see you on my channel. The story I'm going to tell you today is pure. It is true that all the bad things that happen in life happen for a reason. It is said that we can appreciate the good things, the things when they happen to us. I hope you enjoy this story. I wish you a pleasant viewing experience.
Barbara had always known she was going to be a doctor, ever since she was a child. Ever since that ill-fated day when the car she was traveling with her parents to the seaside had been involved in an accident. Mom and Dad were killed. They probably could have been saved, but the ambulance kept coming and coming. In the end, the parents just bled out and died before the doctors arrived. Little Barbara was only 5 years old at the time. She already understood everything, felt everything, and knew that if Mom and Dad had been helped a little earlier, they might well have survived. But what happened, happened. And since the girl had no other relatives, she was placed in an orphanage. Not by years, serious little girl knew that tears cannot help grief. Mommy and Daddy will never come back. But she promised herself that when she grew up, she would become a doctor to selflessly save people's lives. Even her games were mostly hospital games, while the other girls played mother goss or barbershop, doing each other's fancy hairstyles. It was vital for Barbara to cure and heal everyone. She could operate on dolls, bears, and bunnies from morning till night. Sometimes, however, she was able to be a doctor not for real. The girl willingly helped the children in the orphanage, sealed cuts with plasters, smeared wounds with special ointments, treated bumps and bruises. She was provided with medical equipment by the medical station. When the orphanage nurse realized that the girl needs all these bandages and absorbent cotton not for fun and games, but for real help, she willingly allowed her to take care of other children. "Oh, it's easier for me. On the contrary," laughed the nurse. "They were always coming to me for nonsense and whining. At least now I can rest a little." Barbara grew up to be a smart and responsible girl. Her peers considered her boring because she rarely took part in traditional children's fun. She just sat and studied all day long. Barbara was well aware that she had to finish school with excellent results to enter medical school. Looking as the girl diligently rooting over textbooks or studying a large medical encyclopedia brought from the library, educators and teachers shook their heads. And why such complexity? You don't have to become a doctor. You can work as a nurse, go to some easier college. Isn't that too high a bar you've set for yourself, girl? But Barbara stuck her chin up stubbornly and said confidently, "No, I'm going to be a doctor, and only a doctor." Even in high school, when the other girls began to be interested in boys, to show off, run to discos and go on dates, Barbara remained a white crow. She wasn't interested in all those love stories. They tried to court her, of course. The girl was nice, pretty, but none of the suitors were successful. Barbara invariably turned them all down with a polite smile. Eventually, the boys themselves gave up on her. "She's insensitive," they said dismissively. "No emotion, no interest. Such a one must be unpleasant even to kiss, like a cold frog." There was one boy, however, who wouldn't back down until the end. His name was Wilson, and he had been secretly in love with Barbara since first grade. He'd been giving her all kinds of attention. He brought her bunches of blooming lilacs and bouquets of wildflowers, stole apples for her at the nearest market, even composed poems secretly in class and wrote them in a thick notebook. All his efforts were in vain. Barbara treated him with sympathy, but just as a friendly classmate, and did not want to see him as a young man in love. Wilson even thought about going to medical school and becoming a doctor. That's when the girl will finally pay attention to him and notice. But unfortunately, this dream had to leave. It is impossible to become a doctor without an excellent knowledge of chemistry and biology, and he had problems with it. Wilson soberly assessed his chances and realized that he will never get into medical school. Then he had another dream, to become a lifeguard. "I'm going to save people's lives," he told Barbara. "That's very good," Pamela nodded seriously. Saving lives is the noblest purpose of man. Still, she did not let the young man get too close to her, as if she was afraid of becoming attached to him. Finally, it was time for the last bell, U's graduation ball. And now yesterday's boys and girls became independent girls and boys, released from the orphanage in an independent life, like fledglings flown from the nest. Many of Barbara's classmates cried, vowed not to forget about each other, to call and meet. Barbara had no regrets about leaving the orphanage. She was eager to start a new life. The state provided all orphanage graduates with their own place to live. Barbara got a tiny one-room apartment on the outskirts of the city, but she was glad for it. After the orphanage, where no one had his own corner, where you could stay alone, she finally became a full-fledged owner of a personal little home. Barbara got into medical school easily the first time. She couldn't believe it. And so began the busy and filled to the brim days of studentship. Who said that female students lead a carefree life? Maybe in other universities it was so. But medical students clearly had no time for fun. They didn't even have time to breathe. It was hard, exhausting, but also terribly interesting. Barbara didn't faint at the sight of blood like some of her peers. She walked calmly into the anatomy theater, watched autopsies being performed, nonchalant and cold as the Snow Queen. Look at her fellow students whispered, looks at the corpses, and not a single muscle in the face does not tremble, as if she really has a heart of ice. At the institute, as well as in the orphanage, Barbara also did not get close to anyone. She made neither girlfriends nor friends. It is no wonder that soon on the course she was called a crammer and upstart. Fortunately, Barbara did not care about gossip. After the first session, she began to receive an increased scholarship as an excellent student. But still, as it turned out, there was not enough money to live on. Earlier in the orphanage, the girl did not think about where all these benefits of life come from. She always had a piece of bread and butter and a bowl of hot meat soup. The management of the orphanage provided all its students with clothes, shoes, toys, books, and medicines. Now, having become independent, Barbara realized with horror that every month she literally spent a lot of money going nowhere. And although the state took care of some of the expenses, such as utility bills, water, gas, and electricity, there were still many other expenses. Mobile communication with the internet, not to mention just buying basic, most necessary food, potatoes, pasta, bread, oil, salt, and sugar. Barbara even tried to wear her clothes in such a way that they would not deteriorate, and she did not throw away her broken shoes, but carefully glued them together with superglue, and she wore them until they literally fell apart on her feet. It became quite obvious that she needed to find a job, or rather, a part-time job to combine it with her studies. Options for a student who disappeared all day at the institute for classes, there were many. But all, night cashier in a convenience store, waitress, call center operator, there were still completely unacceptable options like escort or striptease, but Barbara, of course, did not even consider them. She dreamed of working in an ambulance, but they didn't accept students under the 4th year, and she needed practice. She wasn't afraid. But no one wanted to take her to the ambulance. And yet one day, fate smiled on her. It wasn't without the help of the department chair, Associate Professor Morgan. Once during a break, he noticed in the cafeteria that Barbara diligently counts the change and then buys herself a scone and tea. When the girl sat down modestly at a table in the corner, Morgan approached her with his tray and nodded to a neighboring chair. "Is it free here?" Barbara nodded, though frankly she wasn't too happy about the neighborhood. Gnawing on a bun in front of the department head was a dubious pleasure. What if she choked and coughed? But she couldn't jump up and run away now. She hadn't had a poppy seed in her mouth since this morning, and her stomach was already cramping with hunger. As luck would have it, Morgan's tray was full of first, second, and compote. Barbara sniffed the aroma of the rich borscht with sour cream and swallowed hungry saliva, and how appetizing the cutlet looked. He'd taken a bun for himself, too. No, it was just a mockery of a young and hungry body. Without a word, Morgan silently moved his tray toward Barbara. "Eat, Barbara," he said sternly. Barbara didn't even realize it at first, thinking she'd misheard him. "I beg your pardon," she asked hesitantly. "I said, eat at once. You're a pain to look at. You're glowing through and through. You're going to exhaust yourself." Barbara flushed with humiliation. God, she was ashamed of herself. It was one thing to be quietly starving herself, but it was another to be noticed by others. Morgan must have noticed the way she was looking at his tray. What a shame. "Thanks, but no thanks," she mumbled. "You must have misunderstood me. I'm not hungry at all. In fact, I was just leaving." She made an attempt to jump up, catching her hand and almost knocking over her glass of tea, which she hadn't even touched yet. But a sharp shout from the head of the department made her freeze in place. "Sit down, Barbara," he exclaimed angrily. "Sit down at once. You don't have to make a spectacle of yourself in front of me. I can see you're starving. I've been watching you for a long time." Barbara collapsed back into her chair. "What do you think of yourself?" he said. "What do you really think that you are capable of learning such a complex, responsible science as medicine on an empty stomach? Before you are literally shaky from weakness. Why don't you eat properly? Would you care to explain it to me?" Barbara remained silent. He didn't think she was starving herself voluntarily. It must be hard for him to imagine what it's like when every penny counts. "What are your parents doing?" continued to rage at the head of the department. "Yes, they have to literally forcefully cram breakfast, lunch, and dinner into you. Or do they live in another city? Where are you from?" "I'm from here," Barbara said grimly, not looking him in the eye. "I don't have any parents. I'm from an orphanage." A shadow came over Morgan's face for a second, but he frowned sternly. "Don't mess with my head. If you're an orphan, you're entitled to tons of benefits from the state." Barbara grinned at his naivety, not as many as one might think. For some reason, many people are sure that all former orphans cannot work at all, live happily, and get a lot of money. But in fact, even to get a single allowance, you know how much you have to run back and forth with paperwork, and you are constantly rejected. Some miserable certificate is missing, or signed in the wrong place, or signed in the wrong place. You have to have nerves of iron to overcome all these bureaucratic obstacles, and it takes a lot of time. And you understand, I study during the day. I don't have much free time. Morgan's gaze softened a little. He moved the tray gently toward the girl again. Eat, Barbara, he said. I ordered lunch especially for you." Barbara flared to the roots of her hair. "Why? I don't. Do you?" Morgan shook his head. "I'm not hungry. Luckily, my wife cooks for me and gives me home-cooked food to take to work." Barbara hesitantly took the spoon. She was still uncomfortable, but the sight and smell of borscht made her head spin. "Enjoy your meal," Morgan said softly. Barbara took the spoon to her mouth. God, what a borscht it was. It was delicious. Barbara held it in her mouth for a while, not swallowing, as if trying to memorize the taste. The first spoonful was followed by a second, then a third. Before Barbara knew it, she had emptied the whole plate. Morgan silently moved the second one to her. Without further ado, the girl went on with the mashed potatoes and cutlet. After she had finished the second course, the head of the department also silently gave her a compote and a bun, but Barbara realized that she had had enough. "Thank you. I've had enough," she said. It was delicious. "What are you going to do, Barbara?" he asked her sternly. "You realize you won't last long like this. By the way, your brains don't work as well on an empty stomach." "I've been looking for a job," Barbara admitted, and added hastily, "naturally, so it wouldn't interfere with my studies." Morgan drummed his fingers on the table. "I could, of course, hire you to do some paperwork in the department," he said, changing to you. "But the trouble is, you're really studying during the day, aren't you?" "Oh, no, I can do it myself," Barbara said, embarrassed. "Don't worry." "What kind of work would you like to do?" Morgan asked. Barbara lowered her eyes. "Ideally, I'd like to work in something medical," she admitted. "I thought about working in an ambulance, but they don't take students before their 4th year." "Would you go to hospital as a nurse?" In the night shift, specified the head of the department, strictly looking at her over his glasses. "Oh, I would love to. But then, most likely they won't take me either." "I'm a freshman," Barbara said hesitantly. Morgan shook his head. "An old friend of mine owns a private clinic. If I'd put in a good word for you, he'd take you in right now." Barbara's heart beat faster. "Really, you would?" she asked incredulously, afraid to believe it. "If I'm sure you really want the job," Morgan said firmly. Morgan warned, "Keep in mind, being a nurse is far from romantic. You'll have to do the cleaning, and you'll have to take ducks out from under the bed." "I'm ready," Barbara said quickly and firmly. "Honestly, I'm ready." "Then, it's a deal," nodded the head of the department. "I'll contact Michael today and recommend you." "Thank you. Thank you very much." Barbara clasped her hands to her heart, unable to believe that the problem had really been solved, and she had gotten a job at the hospital. "But don't forget your studies," the head of the department reminded her sternly. "Work should not interfere with your education, remember." "I remember," Barbara nodded quickly. "I remember everything and I understand." And that's how her work at a private clinic specializing in rich and famous clients began, just who Barbara didn't get to see there in the couple months she worked there. Show business and movie stars, famous politicians, athletes, journalists. Before that, Barbara had imagined that all these popular personalities were some kind of celestials, but it turned out that stars are just as human as the rest of us. They can also have health problems, including not the most pleasant ones, and they could be the possessors of a nasty character. However, Barbara had a good self-control and did not show her curiosity to the sick. She just did her job. At first, of course, it wasn't easy. After the night shift, there was no energy left to pack up and go to the institute for classes. So great was the temptation to just crawl to the bed, so inviting, so soft, to fall on it and sleep for 12 hours straight. But Barbara remembered the promise she'd made to Morgan not to let her studies slip. With a sigh, she would make herself a cup of very strong instant coffee and drive to class. At first, she would literally fall asleep at the institute, especially if it was a lecture and not a practical class. Her head would fall on her crossed arms, and Barbara would fall into a deep, dark pit, but she knew it wouldn't work that way. This wasn't why she'd gone to medical school, so that at least during class, Gradually, Barbara learned to sleep in spurts wherever possible. In her spare 5 minutes, in the hospital, on the road, on public transportation, buses and subways, she fell asleep quickly and woke up just as quickly if the situation demanded it. Of course, it was physically difficult to cope with the lack of sleep, but the girl consoled herself with the fact that, for example, young mothers who have infants in their arms constantly exist in such a mode and do not sleep at night, sleep at intervals. But when she received her first paycheck, she was overjoyed. Barbara finally bought herself new shoes and a jacket for spring, and for the first time in a long time, she allowed herself to eat ice cream and bought a whole bucket at once. She'd enjoyed it that evening while watching a show about doctors. And everything was going well, just fine, until a new patient showed up at the hospital. His name was Christian, and he was one of the wealthiest men in the country. A banker, a rich man, owner of factories, newspapers, steamships, as Mayakovsky wrote. Christian was already 70 years old, but he still stood at the head of his corporation and dashingly ran things. He had no children. So everyone around only wondered who this rich man will leave all his fortune after his death. However, judging by the behavior of the billionaire, in the next few decades to die, he was definitely not going to die. Yes, his health was no longer the same as in his younger years, and recently his legs began to weaken and fail. And if earlier Christian had been using a cane, then in the last 6 months the situation had worsened it to such an extent that he had to use a wheelchair to move around. This did not please Christian, who intended to get back on his feet as soon as possible. That was why he went to the clinic where Barbara worked as a nurse. Christian was to undergo a complex spinal surgery that would restore his ability to walk normally. From the very first days of his stay at the clinic, Christian showed everyone his bad temper. He was rude to the doctors, rude to the nurses, and did not consider the nurses as people at all. He ran the staff back and forth like servants. They were afraid to argue with him because he was an important and wealthy client. It would be irrational to miss such a large patient, but his antics became harder and harder to tolerate. One day Barbara was cleaning the room next door to Christian's and suddenly heard a noise, the clinking of broken glass, a woman's shriek, followed by a man's loud swearing. Startled, Barbara rushed to the next room, and a frightened, crying nurse came rushing out to meet her. She literally had no face on her. The girl gasped. "Adriana, what's wrong?" she asked in alarm. The nurse, sobbing, replied, "That Christian threw a cup of hot tea at me." "Oh my God," Barbara gasped. "Why?" "Because he didn't ask for tea, he asked for coffee. But he can't have coffee." The nurse sobbed pitifully. "His heart's not right anymore. His blood pressure's high enough as it is." At that time, an angry growl came from the room. "Where is she? Where is that bitch? She'll be out of the hospital like a baby. You don't know how to work and behave with patience. Stupid girls like that have no place among decent people." "Does he think he's a decent person?" Barbara grinned wickedly. Adriana sobbed fearfully. "Oh, Barbara, I'm afraid he's going to get me fired." "You won't," she said firmly, surprised at her own confidence. "Let me try to talk to him." "You what?" Amazed nurse. "He's in such a state that he won't even listen to you. He'll only yell. Thank you if he doesn't hit you." "Let him try." Barbara was indignant and pushed the door of Christian's room open. A man with a thin face and a piercing evil look was sitting in his chair, staring disapprovingly at her. Beside him was a large man, his guard, who never left his master's side. "You weren't invited here, sweetheart," Christian said in a sarcastic, nasty voice. "Where is that stupid chicken? Bring her here to me. I'll teach her how to behave with respectable patience," Christian growled. Barbara was outraged. "By what right do you allow yourself to be rude to the clinic staff?" she exclaimed in indignation. "That's right," Christian said. "That I am a client and she is a servant." "You say slave?" the girl parried. "Exactly. Act like real servants," Christian smirked, sassing a woman, throwing dishes at her. "Who are you?" "Her master." Christian raised his thick gray eyebrows ironically and gave Barbara a scrutinizing look. "Who are you?" "Her lawyer." "I'm an employee of the hospital," Barbara said evasively, realizing that a mere nurse was hardly an authority to him. "An employee?" Then Christian chewed his lips thoughtfully and drummed his fingers on the arm of his chair. "Would you at least get me a coffee?" "Okay," the girl nodded nonchalantly. "Just answer me one question, please." "Why should I?" "Anyway, okay, give me your question. It's boring anyway," Christian waved his hand. "Have you already made a will?" Barbara asked in an innocent voice. Christian's eyes widened, and then a grimace of anger crossed his face. "What's it to you? What do you care about my will? There's no place for you in it anyway. Don't get your hopes up." "That's not what I mean," Barbara shrugged indifferently. It's just that if you haven't made a will yet, you better hurry up. What are you implying? It's so lousy, the billionaire sputtered, indignant. Do you want to send me to the afterlife? So I do not want. You're sending yourself, Barbara said calmly. You're demanding coffee. With your blood pressure. Well, if it's not fatal, it's a stroke at best. Although, frankly, that's not very good. You'll probably be paralyzed and helpless. Christian wanted to object, but he shut his mouth after thinking about it. Christian, let me throw her out of here, the guard suggested, and Barbara timidly backed away, taking a step back, realizing that she would not be able to compete with such a big man. But Christian shook his head in surprise. Christian answered, No, wait. I like this brave girl. At least she doesn't fawn over me like the rest of the staff at the almshouse. By the way, Barbara said in a shaky voice, it's not very polite to speak of people in the third person. What an upbringing you have, Mr. Christian. The guard stepped toward her with a cautionary look, his eyebrows drawn together, clearly intending to teach her a lesson. But the master stopped him again with an imperious movement. Look at him. He's not afraid at all. I say, what is your name? Little one, he said to Barbara, looking at her curiously. It's not polite to poke a stranger, either, she said, even if they are much younger than you. Christian laughed. Look at you. I have to keep my eyes open for you. But all right, you, he emphasized the last word with intonation. So, what's your name, dearie? Barbara Valerievna for you, the girl said glumly. Listen, Barbara Valerievna, is it really impossible to drink coffee at all? I'm a terrible coffee addict. I can't go long without coffee. You can't. Barbara cut her off. I've already given you the prospects and consequences. You'd better drink some herbal teas. Christian winked squeamishly. I hate that stuff. Now how about some hot chocolate? The girl suggested. Christian grumbled unhappily. I'm not 5 years old. Barbara waved her hands. Well, excuse me, I can offer juice, morsels of compote. Christian couldn't stand it and laughed, turning to his guard. I haven't had compote in ages. Do you believe it? My grandmother used to make amazing cherry compote. She used to make jars of it for the winter. Since then, I've never tasted such delicious compote anywhere else. No store sells it. No restaurant makes it. Barbara smiled. If you want cherry compote, I can make it for you. I make it myself. I wouldn't recommend it, Christian, the guard said warningly. I don't know what kind of compote she has in there. What could she put in it? Barbara rolled her eyes. I have nothing else to do. But if you don't want to, it would be suggested, Barbara said. No, wait. Christian waved the guard away with annoyance. What could she be slipping me? She must realize she'd go straight to jail, and there's no profit in it for her. Stop talking about me. I'm still here, the girl said. I'm sorry, Barbara Valerievna, Christian corrected with a grin, but so I agree. Bring your compote tomorrow, she said in an adamant tone. I'll be on the night shift again, and I'll bring you a 3-liter jar. Why wait for tomorrow, upset billionaire, dreaming of cherry compote like a grandmother. After all, you can go home. It's nighttime. There's no traffic, there and back. He kept straying from you to you again. I can't leave my workplace, the girl said sternly. What time does your shift end? V0600, but then I have to go to the institute. You're just stumping me, Christian got upset. Well, if you want, I'll give you money for a cab there and back. No one will even notice that you're gone for an hour. I'm not leaving the workplace, Barbara repeated. Be patient. I like your temper. Christian suddenly shook his head. Flint, you can't be persuaded, can you? So you're a student, then? Yes, Barbara nodded. I'm finishing my first year of medical school. So you're working part-time. You don't have enough money. Christian continued to inquire, and then nodded to himself. Of course I'm short. I remember it all very well. I was a student myself, living in a dormitory, struggling from bread to water. Oh, it was a glorious time. He smiled dreamily. The guard looked at his master in bewilderment. What was good? Christian, you say you didn't have enough to eat. We were short of money. We didn't have a place of our own. Don't you understand, Leslie? The billionaire dismissed the situation with a nonchalant tone. I don't know how to explain it to you. I had so much zest for life back then. Studying at the institute during the day, unloading railroad cars at night, running to your dorm, making yourself a buttered sandwich. And how will you find it tasty? A real treat. Christian waved his hand in frustration. Now there's lobsters, black caviar, You can eat it with a spoon and eat fresh oysters with champagne, but there is no such pleasure as in my youth. All this was, of course, interesting. But Barbara glanced at her watch and was about to leave. She had not yet finished wet cleaning the next room. "I have to go to work," she said. "Try to get some sleep. Christian, I'll bring you the compote tomorrow night. I promise." The billionaire looked at her carefully and intently. "Here you go," he held out something at last. "What is it?" The girl was wary. "You'll find out tomorrow," Christian smiled enigmatically. Wishing him good night, Barbara left the room and closed the door behind her. The nurse was waiting for her a little farther away. At the sight of Barbara, she immediately rushed across the hospital corridor to her. "What took you so long?" Adriana asked. "I was about to run for help. I don't know what that old geezer could have done to you." Barbara smiled. "As you can see, I'm alive and well." Adriana examined her face anxiously, as if looking for signs of a beating. "How much did he yell at you?" she asked. "No, not really," Barbara grinned. "I only got off with a can of cherry compote," and she laughed, noticing the confused look on Adriana's face. She obviously thought Barbara had lost her mind. The next evening, when she brought her own compote to billionaire Christian, he had a serious conversation with her. First, he ordered the guard to open the jar, nodding like a child, and told him to fill the glass to the top. "Be careful, it's cold," Barbara warned him. But Christian only waved it away impatiently. "Christian, I wouldn't risk it," the guard said, glancing warily at Barbara. "I don't know what this compote is made of, or what berries it's made of." "Don't worry, I won't poison you," she grinned. Christian put his lips to the glass and even moaned with pleasure, "God, I don't believe it. It was the same flavor, the same compote from my childhood." He gulped down the glass and held it out for another drink, laughing at the guard's disgruntled face. Barbara filled the glass herself and handed it to the billionaire. This time he drank without hurrying, savoring, stretching the pleasure. "It tastes marvelous," he summarized at last. Barbara even laughed to herself. And that's all it takes to make one of the richest men in the country happy. But here's the thing. "What's your name, Barbara?" He looked at her with a keen gaze in his intelligent eyes. She was surprised, but he remembered. Christian wasn't as simple and primitive as he might have seemed at first glance. "Fools don't make billionaires, that's for sure." "Yes," she nodded. "Listen to me. I want to offer you a job." Barbara was even more surprised. "A job? I have a job." He chuckled derisively and looked around the hospital walls with an expressive gaze. "It's a job to carry waste out from under old, rich, infirm people. To wipe their drool and snot, to be sleep-deprived, malnourished, and still get a pittance." Barbara raised her chin proudly. "You may not believe me, Christian, but I really love my job. I love what I do. Yes, it's not the limit of my dreams. In the future, I plan to be a doctor. I've always wanted to be. But right now I'm gaining valuable and important experience." "That's all fine," he nodded understandingly, looking at her again with a testing gaze. Barbara felt like shrinking back and wrapping her arms around his shoulders, as if to protect herself. "But there's still not enough money, is there?" Of course there wasn't enough money, but Christian didn't want to admit it. It was as if the girl would humiliate herself. He read the answer on her face and confirmed it with satisfaction. "Not enough. I'm telling you, I was young myself. I don't understand. So many things you need, so much you want, and you cannot buy. And even more so for girls. Cosmetics, outfits, shoes, handbags. It's not money that makes you happy," Pamela objected unconvincingly. "You remembered yesterday how delicious a plain buttered sandwich seemed to you when you were young," Christian said, agreeably. "But it wasn't about what I ate. It was about how old I was." Barbara was starting to get tense about this conversation, and she began to think of a neater way to get out of here. She'd kept her promise. She'd brought him compote. Now let everyone leave her alone. And at that moment, Christian suddenly opened his mouth and called out a number, 150,000. Barbara didn't even immediately realize what he meant. "What 150,000? She asked him again. "That's what I will pay you per month if you agree to work for me." She thought she had misheard. 150,000 rubles a month. "Would you like me to pay in dollars or euros?" Christian grinned. Barbara shook her head in fright. God, what dollars, what euros? She had never even held such a sum of money in rubles, not even in her eyes. "And what will I have to do for this?" she cautiously clarified, still afraid that the billionaire is simply playing a trick on her, mocking her. Or maybe he was crazy. What kind of nonsense is he talking? Pretty much what you're doing in the hospital right now, only more skilled nursing. I need a personal nurse to monitor my condition after surgery. Give me medications, monitor my diet and physical condition as needed. In general, something like a live-in nurse, of course, he added. I live in the country, in a big house. You don't have to drive back to the city every day. Besides, sometimes I might need a shot or feel sick in the middle of the night. Barbara's insides sank immediately. The hope that had barely appeared was instantly destroyed. No, it's not right for me. I'm sorry, Barbara mumbled. Christian raised his eyebrows in surprise. But why? I can't stay with you 24 hours a day. I have school. We can't skip classes. I don't want to miss classes, Barbara said, feeling guilty and unhappy at the same time. I can't believe it's $150,000. It's already the second half of May, Christian reminded her nonchalantly. There's not much time left until the end of the school year. When is your session? In June, you'll take your exams and you're done. You'll come and stay with me for the summer. Until September, I think. I'll finally get back on my feet, and there won't be any need for round-the-clock supervision. But I'm just finishing my freshman year, she reminded me. I'm not authorized to provide medical care, especially not for money. It's nothing, Christian said nonchalantly. I'll take care of it. We'll just contract you as a nanny or a housekeeper. Just a couple of trifles. Barbara was still hesitating. The offer was too tempting to refuse, but at the same time something about it made her uneasy. What is it that frightens you? As if reading her thoughts, Christian asked her affectionately, almost paternally. Barbara shrugged her shoulders uncertainly. Honestly, I don't know. It all sounds absolutely fantastic, and yet terribly strange. The billionaire frowned. What's so strange about it? Well, Barbara pondered, trying to formulate her thought better. You're such a rich, famous man. You can afford to choose the best hospitals and the best doctors, including the best caregivers. And yet you're offering this job to me, a girl with no experience, and you don't know me at all. And yet you're offering to move into your house for the summer. She's right. By the way, interposed Leslie's guard. He had a definite dislike for Barbara, and he was not interested in her accepting his master's offer. Shut up, Christian said with annoyance. This has nothing to do with you, Christian replied sharply. But Barbara decided to be persistent and insist on answering. And yet, Christian, why me? What is your motive? The billionaire laughed. Believe me, I have no ulterior motive. I'll tell you the truth. I really liked you for your courage, boldness, and independence. It's obvious that you're really passionate about what you do and that you really want to be a good doctor. Besides, you don't ingratiate yourself with me, Christian said angrily. That's all my motives. Well, it sounded logical and convincing, but Barbara was still in no hurry to give a definitive answer. Could I think about it until tomorrow? She asked hesitantly. You've stunned me. I have to make sense of all this information. Christian nodded favorably. Think. I'm not rushing you. Barbara really wanted to consult someone who was more experienced and wiser than she was, who could give her really valuable advice, but who? Her first impulse was to go to Morgan, the head of the department. But the girl was uncomfortable, because if she agreed to Christian's proposal, she would have to resign from the clinic, where she got thanks to Morgan's Mike. He called a friend of his, and he hired the student Barbara. Wouldn't she look extremely ungrateful in Morgan's eyes? So Barbara turned to her classmate Emily for advice, not that she was particularly close to her. It was just that they sat next to each other in Latin class. At first, Emily couldn't believe what Barbara had said was true. Her eyes widened and she exclaimed, "Are you kidding?" Barbara sighed heavily. "I don't think you're joking." "Oh my God, you silly girl. What's stopping you?" Emily shook her head. "It's literally a dream job. I'd run to the ends of the earth to get such a great offer." "And you're not worried about anything?" Barbara asked cautiously. "What should I be worried about?" Emily wriggled her finger at her temple. "I think you're paranoid or stupid beyond belief." "What if he starts coming on to me?" Barbara lowered her voice and blushed, molest. Emily shrugged. "So what?" Barbara was dumbfounded. "So what? He's old, and I don't like him at all." Emily rolled her eyes. "God, it's a shame that people as shallow as you get such fancy offers. They don't even know how to use them." Barbara didn't take offense at the harshness and asked curiously, "How would you use it to your advantage?" Emily shook her head. "On the contrary, I would try to please this billionaire, to make him fall in love with me. I would go there in a short robe, fidgeting in front of him, seduce, and then he would marry her." Barbara gasped. "But he's 70 years old." "So what?" Emily snorted dismissively. fabulous wealth automatically makes him a young, handsome man. All the more reason it's even a good thing that he's old, will die, and his entire fortune will go to an impecunious widow. Ugh, what are you saying? It's disgusting to listen to, said Barbara. I'm not like that. Oh, yes, I'm not like that. I'm waiting for the streetcar. A holy soul on crutches, Emily said mockingly. God, where do such idealists come from? Anyway, I'm not going to give you any more advice. But if you turn down this job, you'll be a fool. Just know it, she said. Better yet, give me the phone number of this billionaire. Maybe he'll be interested in me, too, she winked at Barbara. Emily laughed. Both girls were immediately reprimanded by the teacher. Turns out Latin class had already started. After studying until the evening, Barbara decided to say yes after all. She was scared. Somehow it seemed that she was making a huge mistake, although she could not explain to herself the reasons for her excitement. She had no real arguments against it. Just banal female intuition. As it turned out, her intuition didn't let her down. At first, however, everything seemed quite decent. Christian quietly gave Barbara the opportunity to finish the course and pass the session. By that time, he had already undergone surgery and was discharged home. When the girl passed the last exam with a perfect score and timidly dialed Christian's number, which he gave her along with his business card, he got right down to business. So, you're free until September 1st. That's great. I'll send a car for you right away. Oh, what car? Barbara was confused, just like that. I'm not ready yet. I haven't even packed my things yet. Why do you need things? The billionaire was genuinely surprised. Why? You need something to wear. And little things. Shampoo, toothbrush, comb. It's nothing. Christian laughed into the phone. You don't even have to worry about clothes. I'll give you a uniform like all my employees. Brushes, shampoo, and other hygiene products are available in my house in unlimited quantities. The housekeeper procures linens, towels, iron, hair dryer. You'll be supplied with all that too. But then, maybe I should take my books and textbooks with me, Barbara asked, even more confused. I'll study at my leisure. Okay, you can take your books, Christian agreed graciously, dictating the address. The car was leaving. Christian's house struck the girl to the core. It was not just a mansion, but a medieval castle surrounded by a strong, almost fortress-like wall. She was brought by a silent driver who did not utter a single sound during the whole trip. The luxury car pulled into Christian's property and slowed down. Barbara grabbed the door handle and was about to get out of the car, but then the driver spoke for the first time. Don't. Don't what? Barbara didn't understand. Don't get out while there are dogs running around the grounds. They can tear up a stranger. Barbara shuddered involuntarily. Wow, that's so harsh. What are we going to do? They'll put them in the enclosures now. And then the dogs will gradually get used to you. It will be safe to go out of the house. She was immediately uncomfortable with the realization that it would be impossible to even walk around the grounds without fear of being jumped on and torn to pieces. Ominous dogs. Finally, the dogs were corralled into their enclosures and Barbara was given the go-ahead to go out. Smelling the stranger's scent, the dogs threw themselves against the bars of the enclosure and barked frantically. Barbara walked briskly past them with her head tucked into her shoulders. Only once did she turn that way and stunned. How huge and intimidating these dogs seemed to her. She didn't even know what breed they were, but they were the size of a calf each. Such a beginning somewhat discouraged and upset the girl. Her mood immediately soured. However, in the house she was welcomed with cordiality and friendliness. A smiling young housekeeper took Barbara to her room and handed her a set of home and night clothes. Get settled, and Catherine nodded. Do you mind that I'm a little older than you? I'm 21 and you're 19. That's fine. My name is Jessica and you're Barbara. I know. Christian warned me. I'm sure we'll be friends, Jessica winked. I don't even have any friends in my house. The cook is old and the rest of the staff are men. Thank you, Jessica. Barbara nodded, feeling grateful and a little cheerful. Thank you for such a warm welcome. I'll get changed and come downstairs. Barbara smiled again. I'll meet you downstairs and take you straight to the master. As soon as Barbara unwrapped the sets of home clothes she had brought, she was almost struck with shock. It was a frank, very frank robe, short to the point of obscenity. She immediately remembered the words of her classmate. I would walk around in a short robe, twirling my ass, provoking and seducing. Wow, like in the water. No, it was absolutely impossible to wear this obscenity. After hesitating, Barbara remained in her jeans and t-shirt. When she got to the first floor, she met Jessica's disgruntled gaze. What's the matter? She asked coldly. Why didn't you change? Have you seen these clothes yourself? Barbara asked in a lowered voice. They're some kind of prostitute outfits. These clothes are uniforms, Jessica whispered through her teeth. If Christian sees that you didn't put on what was prepared for you, he'll be very angry. A uniform, you say? Barbara shook her head. I don't see the same robe on you, for example. Why are you wearing normal clothes? Jessica visibly tensed. You're new. There's a heightened interest in you. You're getting all the accolades. And I'm no longer of interest to the master in that regard. Barbara went cold with horror. In that respect, she asked in a trembling voice, what do you mean, Morgan? That he molested you, forced you to perform some kind of intimate service. Jessica seemed to regret her sudden frankness. Oh, you silly girl, she laughed. Don't make up scary stories. No one is going to hit on you. Christian, between you and me, has not been able to lead a full life as a man for a long time. Well, you know what I mean. I hope you understand. Then what's all this for? Barbara's lips curled squeamishly as she remembered the robe that had been offered to her. If he's been out of condition for a long time, he just likes to look at young, appetizing girls. Jessica shook her head. What's it to you? You'll walk in front of him in that uniform, make the old man happy. He won't even touch you. Barbara tensed. The fact that Christian wouldn't touch her wasn't much consolation. It made her uncomfortable, disgusted, and disgusting. If she had known about the billionaire's base tendencies, she would never have taken the job. But it was probably not too late to say no. Barbara's eyes lit up with hope. But Jessica, as if reading her thoughts, immediately warned, don't you dare to merge and refuse. The master doesn't like to be let down. He punishes you severely. What kind of punishment? Barbara asked. Does he feed it to his dogs? Seriously, Jessica said, but when she saw the girl's pale face, she laughed. Relax, silly. I'm just kidding. Did you believe me? However, Barbara was not in the mood for jokes. With her arms around her shoulders, Barbara bit her lip and wondered what she should do next. Maybe it wasn't too late to leave. After all, it would be possible to get a cab here. Shit, she'd already quit her job at the clinic. They probably won't hire her back. She'd been so wrong, so hasty to accept Christian's offer. But $150,000 was a lot of money. Should she give it up? Slam the door and walk away proudly? As if noticing her doubts and hesitations, Jessica winked encouragingly. Don't worry. What's going to happen if you just put on those rags? Not a thing. But the old man will be happy. He won't let himself go too far, will he? Barbara asked again. I swear on my mother. He's just watching. That's all. Barbara sighed heavily and turned back to the stairs to go back to her room. I'm going to go change, she said. That's a good idea, Jessica approved. Hurry up. I'm waiting for you. Barbara looked like a real call girl in that awful short robe. It was obvious that it hadn't been purchased at a specialty store for healthcare workers, but at a sex store. She tugged the robe awkwardly, feeling completely naked. As she walked down the stairs, Barbara kept trying to pull her robe up tight and close. Jessica brightened when she saw her. Well, that's different. She took the girl's hand and led her to her boss. At the sight of Barbara, Christian's eyes flashed with avid interest. You look beautiful. He approved his new nurse's appearance. But Barbara was not at all pleased by this compliment. She had been on pins and needles all day, feeling the billionaire's gaze on her. No, as Jessica had promised, he didn't allow himself anything unnecessary. He didn't make inappropriate jokes. He didn't let loose. But he kept his gaze on Barbara, not missing the slightest movement. When she gave him the medicine, she had to bend over a little, and Christian so frankly stared at her cleavage that the girl blushed. At midnight, the billionaire retreated to his bedroom, saying he was going to bed. But if I need anything, he added, giving Barbara a meaningful look, I'll call you. Her insides clenched. All she could do was pray he wouldn't need anything. When she saw the confusion on her face, Jessica laughed. Why are you shaking like a leaf? You see, nothing bad happened to you here. The first day of work is over. Nobody's gonna hurt you. Here, have some herbal tea, calm down. How about some wine to relax? Barbara refused the wine, but she accepted the herbal tea gratefully. Maybe she was overreacting. Maybe nothing would happen to her. How long have you worked here? She asked Jessica curiously. 2 years, she said. I came in young and inexperienced. 2. Hey, I even envy you, I must admit. The master likes you, and he's usually generous with gifts. He gave me a lot of gifts too, when he was still interested. But now he doesn't see me as a woman at all. Just a housekeeper, she added a little resentfully. Frankly speaking, Barbara would have preferred Christian to see her as a mere nurse without any male interest. She had not yet figured out definitively how she should feel about her master's little oddities. On the one hand, maybe it really wasn't anything, for really it was just watching. Deciding that the morning was wiser, she went to her room and went to bed. She fell asleep the moment her head touched the pillow. Still, no matter how much Barbara persuaded herself, no matter how much Jessica compelled her, it was not easy to get used to her master's ways. The next day, walking in front of Christian in her mini-dress, Barbara felt terribly uncomfortable. Her arms and legs felt like wood, and his gaze crept over her face and body. The billionaire's gaze was like that of a pesky fly. It made her want to swat it away. I won't make it through the summer, the girl thought in despair. God, I don't need this damned money. Not even $150,000 is worth this humiliation. She felt exactly humiliated. It was terribly embarrassing and disgusting, as if she were walking around half naked in front of her master. She was selling not only her body, but her soul as well. Jessica, watching her suffering, only laughed quietly and twisted her finger at her temple. Barbara couldn't relax, as if she sensed something was wrong, waiting for the thunder to come. And on the third day it did. In the morning, Christian was not his usual behavior. He was unusually lively, even excited. His eyes glittered with an unhealthy, predatory fire. Barbara shrank under his gaze, and the master seemed to be waiting for something, glancing at her every now and then and rubbing his hands together in anticipation. She was at a loss to guess what he was up to, what was waiting for her. Maybe it was time to start worrying, or was she just overreacting as usual? The clue came after dinner. After finishing the meal, Christian smirked and invited Barbara to his room, as he said, for evening treatments. The girl visibly tensed, but still followed in the right direction. In the master's room, that is, in his bedroom, she was in for an unpleasant surprise. Leslie's guard, who for some reason was wearing only underwear, was sitting in a chair. Seeing the guy like that, Barbara yelped and backed away, but Christian waved his hand cordially. "Come in, don't be shy. We're all friends here." And, chuckling, he added, when the girl hesitated on the threshold, "Come in and shut the door behind you. We don't need any witnesses." Again, he chuckled nastily. Barbara went cold. "What did you want, Christian?" she asked with difficulty, moving her naughty tongue. "I'd like to do something nice for you," he smiled. What do you mean?" Barbara asked, confused. "Directly. You're a young, attractive girl with a great figure, full of strength and health. Surely you would like a man," Christian explained. "Yeah, I don't understand," Barbara whispered. "There's nothing to understand. If I were younger, I would have hit on you myself, I promise you. But now I have to content myself with being a mere spectator." Barbara didn't understand a thing, and that ignorance was driving her crazy. Yes, the billionaire nodded nonchalantly. "Now you and Leslie. I'd love to see that." The girl felt dizzy with realization. "You're crazy," she exclaimed. "I won't do it." "Why not?" Christian's eyes rounded in genuine bewilderment. "What's stopping you? Leslie isn't some freak. Young, handsome, strong. Any girl would love to be in your shoes." "I won't do it," Barbara repeated firmly and emphatically. Christian's gaze turned from good-natured and friendly to angry and alienated. "Do you have a choice?" he asked coldly. Barbara's heart sank into her heels. God, Leslie wasn't going to rape her, though she wasn't sure of anything now. "You can't force me," she said, trying to keep her voice firm. "It's against the law." "What are you saying?" Christian laughed and looked at Laird. He chuckled too, as if laughing at her naivety. "Well, why don't you report me to the police?" Barbara took a breath. "I won't report you to the police. I'll just walk away. I'm a free man, not your slave." "Oh, what a temper." Christian looked at the guard again. "She's hot." Then he shifted his gaze to Barbara again and threw it sharply. "You're not going anywhere." "What do you mean?" "I'm not going anywhere," Barbara asked in confusion. "Are you going to hold me by force? Then I'll really have to go to the police." Christian laughed mockingly. "Really? You'll be arrested before you get to the nearest police station." Barbara was speechless for a moment. "Arrest me? What for?" "For stealing an antique gold and diamond watch. It's a museum rarity," Christian said casually, showing her the object on his arm. "But here it is," the girl mumbled dumbly. "I didn't steal anything." "That's so," the master explained to her, almost syllabically, as if to an unintelligent child. "And as soon as you are outside this house, the watch will also mysteriously disappear, and I shall have every reason to believe that it was you who stole it." "You're a monster," Barbara cried out. "You're a scoundrel and a scoundrel. No one in the police force will believe you." "Do you want to check?" He was openly mocking her, and Barbara suddenly realized that he was right. She couldn't prove anything. No one would believe her, and they'd slip the watch into her pocket if they had to. It's ridiculous to compare Christian to her. He's got connections everywhere. "What are you thinking?" the billionaire asked a little mockingly, mistaking her silence for agreement. "That's just it. You should be more cooperative." Leslie moved toward her, but the moment the big man took a step toward her, Barbara regained her senses and jumped aside. The guard caught her by the hem of her short robe, and it slipped off in a flash, leaving her naked. "I'm going to scream," Barbara shouted. Christian shrugged. "You can scream all you want. There's no one in this house who's on your side. My people are all around." Barbara desperately tried to jump out of the door, but Leslie blocked her passage with his broad shoulders. The girl floundered in panic. Her gaze rested on the window, and a fanciful thought flashed through her mind. What if? It was the second floor, wasn't it? It was unlikely that she would be killed, but it was still scary. She didn't have time to think about it. Leslie was coming inexorably toward her. His hands were outstretched, and he was about to grab her in his arms. In desperation, Barbara ripped the frame open, flung the window open, and in 1 second she was on the windowsill. The last thing she heard was Christian's mocking exclamation. "Oh, come on, Leslie, she's just showing off. There's no way she's going to jump, I know it." And the second she did, she jumped. Afterward, Barbara couldn't quite remember how she'd managed to run, overcoming so many obstacles. First of all, the dogs. She was sure that they would pounce on her the second she was on the ground, but she managed to get almost all the way to the stone fence before she heard some rustling behind her. Turning around, Barbara saw 2 dogs. Her heart sank with fear, and without realizing what she was doing, she knelt down and held her hands out, palms up, for the dogs to sniff. "Let me go, please," she asked in a shaky voice, as if she expected them to understand. The dogs were silent, but made no attempt to bark or bite. Barbara, afraid to believe she was saved, began to climb awkwardly up the trunk of the nearest tree, clinging to branches to get over the fence. The rough bark and sharp limbs scratched her bare skin painfully. Her leg was sore from jumping out the window. I think she'd twisted it. But Barbara had no time to feel sorry for herself now. The only thing she could think about was getting out of here. Second, the top of the fence was studded with shards of anti-theft glass, but probably on adrenaline, Barbara didn't even feel the pain as she climbed over the fence. It wasn't until she jumped to the other side that she felt the burning sensation. She discovered in the dim light of the moon that her body was covered with deep cuts from which blood was already beginning to ooze. Thirdly, she was soon pursued. Obviously, neither Christian nor his guard could even think that this stubborn girl would really run away. They believed that she simply did not have the courage to leave Christian's property without clothes, without documents, without money. However, when she did not return to the house and the grounds around the house did not reveal her, the guard sounded the alarm. Barbara heard that she was wanted, and thank God that it was already dark. She rolled down a ravine into a thicket of nettles and almost cried out in pain, but she held back in time. How hard it was for her not to make her presence known. Sometimes the pursuers came very close, and she could hear the cracking of twigs and the crunching of branches above her head. No one had thought to look into the ravine, and the girl had remained unnoticed. She realized later that if the dogs had been on her trail, she would have been detected instantly. Perhaps Christian had been so stunned by her escape that he had not thought of this obvious solution. They searched for her until 2 or 3 in the morning. Finally, Barbara heard an irritated voice in the distance. "To hell with her. She won't run far naked. If she's hungry, she'll come back." Then the noise in the house stopped, the lights went out, and it seemed that all the inhabitants, including the master, were asleep. Barbara waited another hour to be sure. Then she began to climb carefully out of the ravine. Once at the top, she rushed into the forest. She was not afraid of wild beasts or of getting lost. The main thing was to get away from that monster Christian. Stumbling into a small stream, Barbara washed the congealed blood off her body and cooled her skin a little. She kept her blistered feet in the cold water for a while, walking barefoot across the creek bed to throw the dogs off the trail in case they came looking for her again in the morning. By the time she reached the edge of the forest, it was dawn. The birds were singing loudly, and the grass was dewy. She was chilled and cold, but she kept walking, afraid to stop. What a sight she must have been. A forest witch, a swamp Kikimora Baba Yaga. If anyone saw her now, they would be scared to death. The highway loomed ahead, and there was an orange work vest, forgotten by someone, lying on the side of the road. Barbara grabbed it eagerly and pulled it on, trying to keep warm. Only now did she finally realize what she'd gotten herself into. She had escaped from billionaire Christian's house, leaving her papers with him. What was she supposed to do? Go to the police? But only in case Christian wasn't kidding, and instead of taking a statement from her, she'd be arrested. Barbara helplessly covered her face with her hands and sobbed, sinking down onto the dusty highway. Her strength suddenly left her. She had been through too much this night. There was no telling how long she had cried like that. She only came to her senses when a big fire truck appeared on the highway. Barbara, staggering with weakness, got up on unsteady legs and waved her hand, begging it to slow down. She wouldn't dare to stop the cars. After all, she was alone, half naked, with no money. But she could still count on the help of the firemen. Maybe they would give her a ride to town. Apparently, they were on their way back from some fire, because the siren wasn't on. She just had to get home. Barbara always gave the spare keys to her apartment to her neighbor, just in case, so she could definitely get home. And then she'd figure out what to do. What to do, how to return the documents, and how to live her life. As long as that bastard Christian didn't actually report her to the police. He wouldn't dare, would he? Or would he? The door of the fire truck swung open, and Barbara suddenly heard a surprised but familiar voice, a voice from a past life. "Barbara, you?" Looking closer, the girl aghast. "Wilson?" But of course it was Wilson, the ex from the orphanage. A friend, a classmate, long ago and sincerely in love with her, and whom they hadn't seen since graduation. Well, I guess he became a lifeguard after all, just like he was going to be. Wilson gazed at Barbara's crying face, at her fragile figure, covered only by her orange vest, and at the scratches and redness on her neck, arms and legs. The joy of seeing him was gradually replaced by anxiety and concern. "What happened to you? Where did you come from like that?" he asked worriedly. She shook her head helplessly. It's a long story. Nothing. Wilson's eyes gleamed with a hard glint. I'm in no hurry. Who hurt you, Barbara? Crying again, the girl told him everything from beginning to end. Everything that happened afterward reminded Barbara of a Hollywood action movie. After listening to her confused story and glancing at his colleagues, Wilson announced sternly, "We're going to Christian's mansion right now. Let's teach him a lesson." Barbara was frightened out of her wits. Don't. He has money, he has connections. And he might accuse me of stealing. Wilson grinned wickedly. Well, we'll see who's going to accuse who of what. A whole brigade of big guys in uniform had come to his house at dawn. It made a lasting impression on Christian. He was not as brazen and self-confident as he tried to appear in front of a weak and defenseless girl. The sight of a stronger and more worthy opponent made him lose his courage. "I'm nothing. I was only joking," he mumbled. "Barbara must have misunderstood me. I wasn't anything like that. I wouldn't even lay a finger on her." Wilson nodded briefly to Jessica, who stood nearby with a look of horror on her face. "Quickly go up to Barbara's room and get all her things, along with her bag, money, and papers." The housekeeper, pale as a sheet, dashed upstairs without even thinking of arguing. "And you listen carefully, you bastard," Wilson said seriously, playing with muscles that were visible even under his uniform. Turning to Christian, "Listen and remember, if you ever try to see Barbara again, if you ever threaten her, or if a hair falls from her head, I'll bury you in the nearest woods, and nothing will happen to me for it." He promised grimly. "I've got more connections in the police force than you. Thank God, and no amount of money can save you." Wilson frowned. "My connections in the force are more important than your money. Understand? Or do you want me to explain with my fist?" "Got it," Christian mumbled, averting his gaze. "I told you," the guard whispered unhappily, "that you shouldn't have messed with that fool. I knew she'd be nothing but trouble." Meanwhile, Jessica had brought all of Barbara's belongings, and Wilson, giving a command to his companions, left the billionaire's mansion. Barbara was waiting for the boys in the car, neither alive nor dead. When she saw Wilson with her things, she shrieked and threw herself on his neck with joy. A couple months later, classes at the institute began. The second year was even more difficult than the first, but also much more interesting. One day, during a break between classes, Barbara went to the student cafeteria for a snack and ran into the head of the department. She was no longer afraid of the meeting and was no longer embarrassed to look him in the eye, because she had long ago returned to work at his friend Morgan's clinic. "Hello," he smiled at her as if she were an old friend. "I see you're no longer on dry rations for lunch." Barbara smiled, embarrassed. "My husband won't let me starve, and he's very strict about making sure I eat well." "So that's it? You're married?" "Congratulations," Morgan smiled. "I'm really happy for you. I hope you've chosen the right man to marry you." "I hope you've chosen the right man for your mate," the happy girl smiled back, glancing at the ring on her finger. She couldn't get enough of it. "Wilson, like us medics, devotes his life to saving people. He's a fireman." "Oh, but then it's definitely a worthwhile choice." Morgan made a serious face. "I never doubted you, Barbara. Say hello to your husband and thank him for such an important and dangerous job. He, too, deserves a girl like you." "Well, I'll leave you to it. I'll see you later." The head of the department went about his business, and Barbara dialed Wilson at once, and when she heard his voice, she whispered that she was madly in love with him. "I love you too, baby," Wilson said quietly, trying not to let his partners hear their conversation. He was too shy to declare his love in front of the tough men, but that was enough for Barbara. She loved and was loved, and she didn't need anything else from life. Jennifer loved this time of year. She could run quietly along the park's paths, breathing in the fresh scent of grass and flowering trees, still warm from the summer heat. And if you go out very early in the morning at 6 o'clock when the sun is just rising, then the pleasant coolness will help to make your morning jog more intense. Besides, not many people like to get up early, and Jennifer liked that. She didn't even take her headphones with her on her jog. She listened to the rustling of the trees and the singing of waking birds. Sometimes squirrels ran, and mice rustled in last year's leaves. The girl could stop and watch the animals. Toward the middle of her training, dog owners came out for a walk with their pets. Some of them Jennifer recognized, as she had met them time and time again. They nodded their greetings and silently went their separate ways. She had started running in high school with a friend. Sandy had decided in her senior year of high school to lose weight for graduation. She was bored with running alone, so she called Jennifer. Jennifer didn't need to lose weight, she was already slim and agile. But how could she not help her friend? But then Sandy got sick, then she stayed up late, then she had important things to do in the morning. In general, there were many excuses, and Sandy's desire to go jogging in the mornings waned. Jennifer, on the other hand, got into it. She felt good after the run. And over time, Those 5 to 7 kilometers became a habit. Therefore, even when she moved to another city, she was very happy to find a large park with cozy benches and forest paths near her rented apartment. This morning she ran at an easy pace, as she had missed the previous 2 runs, and didn't want to overload her body before a hard day's work. Through her musings, she heard a rather heavy stomping behind her. "I finally caught up with you," said the young man with a puff of breath. "How fast you run." "No, I'm in no hurry," replied Jennifer. "I don't know. I could hardly get close to you. Maybe you're out of shape today." "Maybe," Jennifer suggested. "I've been out of shape every day lately." "Oh, I'm sorry," the man said. "My name is Mike." "Jennifer. Nice to meet you. I've noticed you running around here in the mornings for a long time. Only usually you're back by the time I get out. Well, today we were lucky enough to get out together. Where are you going?" They were approaching a fork in the road toward a new street. "Oh, great. Mind if I come with you?" "Of course not. If it's easier for you. It's much harder for me. But it's time to get back in shape." As they ran up the road together, Jennifer stopped and turned off the tracker. "I'm done." "Then I'm done too. Can I go jogging with you again tomorrow?" "Please, 6:30. On this bench here, I'll stretch a little bit first, and then I'll run. Just please don't be late. I'm on the clock." "No way." The next morning, when Jennifer arrived at the park, Mike was already waiting for her at the agreed place. They started their warm-up together. "How long have you been running?" Mike asked. "More than 5 years. I started in high school." "And you?" "I've been running since I was about 10. Then, however, after high school, I gave it up. But this year I decided to start again. And you know why?" "Why?" "I just saw how you run here every morning with a smile, and frankly speaking, I envied you myself. I've been in a bad mood every morning lately. I thought maybe starting it off with a jog might help." "Of course it would. It's the only thing that makes me feel better. Just positive vibes." After warming up, Jennifer ran her usual route again. She tried not to run very fast, but to keep a steady pace so that the young man wouldn't fall behind very much. Mike tried his best to keep up with the girl, but by the 6th kilometer he was finally exhausted. "Do you mind if I quit today?" "Of course not. You can run your own route at your own pace. I'd love to do it with you. I just don't have that kind of training yet. Tomorrow, same place, same time." "Yeah. See you then." And Jennifer ran easily ahead. Mike really waited for the girl at the appointed place every day. He ran with her more and more. Gradually, they were getting into the suggested pace. After a couple of weeks, Jennifer already stopped restraining her speed, and the young man kept up with her. "You're getting in shape fast, aren't you?" She praised Mike after the next session. "Thanks to you, my beautiful sparring partner. Can I walk you home today?" "Aren't you in a hurry to get to work?" "Not today. I'm on vacation." "Wow. Why don't you get some sleep or go somewhere else?" "I have a lot to do here, but I can spend more time jogging every morning." "Well, that's great. Soon you'll be leaving me behind." "Why would I want to leave such pleasant company?" Now Mike walked Jennifer to the front door every time. It was about 10 minutes from the park to her house, and during that time they chatted about the weather, their activities, and life. That's how Jennifer learned that Mike works as a financial analyst and lives on the other side of the park. He has a car, which he sometimes uses to drive out of town to his dacha, where his parents live year-round. The more the girl talked to him, the more he charmed her with his knowledge, competent speech, friendliness. And the man himself turned out to be handsome. "Just don't fall in love," she said to herself as she recalled her morning jogs during the day. "You don't want that to happen now." But the more often she repeated this mantra to herself, the harder it was for her not to remember her morning companion. On their day off, after another workout, they walked up to the driveway. "I can buy you a delicious morning coffee," Jennifer offered her companion. And at that moment she thought with horror, why am I saying this? I wish he'd say no, and she was greatly relieved when Mike agreed with pleasure. They went into the apartment. Jennifer invited her guest into the kitchen and put the coffee maker on. "Do you mind?" "I'm going to take a shower for now," she asked. No, of course I feel at home, Mike laughed. The girl giggled and went into the bathroom. The next time they went jogging, they got caught in a heavy rain. And after they went up to Jennifer's house, she suggested that the man go into the bathroom to wash his feet, which were covered in mud. "Could I stay?" he asked. "You don't worry. I'll be quick." Sure, Jennifer gave him a towel. Drinking coffee on weekends after a run had become their tradition. They took turns in the shower, too, until one day they bumped into each other in the doorway, and the girl felt the urge to snuggle up to the man. Mike put his arm around her lightly and began kissing her, at first gently, and then realizing that the girl did not resist, more and more insistently and passionately. It was then, after their first intimacy, that Jennifer learned that Mike was married. "I probably shouldn't have done that," he murmured, cuddling the girl in bed. "You didn't like it?" She was upset. "No, it felt really good. You know, how can I put it? Well, it turns out I cheated on my wife." "So you're married?" She jumped up on the bed. "Why didn't you tell me before?" "Well, somehow I didn't have to. As it is about my parents at the dacha told me about the car too. And about my wife I didn't have a chance." "Do you have kids?" "Yes, 2 daughters. So pack up and get out of here. And don't let me see you around me again." "But why?" "I'm so sorry I didn't warn you. I didn't think it would go this far. And then I couldn't stop. You're so beautiful." "Is that why you decided to deceive me?" "I didn't decide anything." Jennifer was sitting in the kitchen, staring off into the distance. How did this happen? She thought. Why didn't I ask him right away? Why did I let it come to this? Then she remembered how attracted she had been to Mike and felt even more remorseful. When Jennifer was a little girl, her father, who called her the most wonderful daughter in the world, suddenly left her mother for another woman. Jennifer then did not understand the complex parental relationships, but fiercely hated her father's new girlfriend. As a teenager, she firmly decided for herself that she would not have affairs with married men. She didn't want other children to experience what she had when her father left. And now she found herself in the position of a mistress herself. Jennifer decided not to cross paths with Mike anymore and began to figure out how she could change the time or route of her runs. The next day, she didn't see anyone. And then she didn't either. On the one hand, the girl was glad that she was no longer tempted, but on the other hand, she resented the fact that she was so easily forgotten after the first time. No more meetings or phone calls. On Saturday, she went into the entrance and suddenly found Mike at the door of his apartment in his usual clothes with a large bouquet in his hands. He rushed over to the girl. "I'm so sorry, please, I didn't know this would happen. I realized I really want to be with you. Don't chase me away, and listen to me." Jennifer stopped at the stairs, but realized that there was no way she was going to get into the apartment unless she talked to Mike. "Why are you here?" "I wanted to apologize. These are for you," he held out the flowers. "You're the best, and I feel really bad without you." "Thank you," Jennifer answered dryly, but her heart was jumping with joy. "Let me through." She walked over and opened the door. "May I wash my hands?" the man asked modestly. "I got them dirty while I was waiting for you." The girl shrugged her shoulders. "Come in." Mike went into the bathroom. Jennifer started looking for a vase, which she didn't remember where she had put away, since she hadn't received flowers as a gift in a long time. As she bent down to look for the vase in the nightstand, Mike came up behind her and put his arm around her. "Let go," she tried to pull away. He squeezed her even tighter. "I'm sorry, I can't do this without you." The girl resisted, but at some point she suddenly realized that she too wanted everything to happen again. She turned and kissed the man. All principles went to waste. Mike rarely showed up for a run now, but he was always waiting for her outside her driveway or apartment. They would go in, tear each other's clothes off with fury, and make love to exhaustion. Then reluctantly they would pull away from each other, and the man would leave. And Jennifer went about her daily business. Every workday she looked forward to the weekend and a new date. You convinced yourself not to fall in love. And not only did you completely dissolve into this man, but you broke your own rules. He's married and has daughters. And you are just a mistress with whom he is resting from family boredom, the girl thought. She was about to come to terms with her situation when she suddenly discovered that she was pregnant. This was not part of her plans at all. Her salary was barely enough for a rented apartment and life. And then there was a baby. The girl decided to have an abortion. Only there was a problem: the procedure was done for a fee, and Jennifer did not have the means. So she decided to tell Mike about the pregnancy. He is also involved in her situation. When the man came to her once again, after intimacy, she said, "I'm pregnant." What he asked her again: "I feel so good with you that I got pregnant. I have to have an abortion, but I don't have the money. Will you help pay for it?" "What abortion?" Mike exclaimed. "It's beautiful. I love you and the baby so much. Give me a son, please. I only have 2 daughters. May you and I have a son." Mike looked at the girl pleadingly. She was very surprised at his reaction, which she had not expected from a married man. Jennifer assumed that there would be a scandal, threats, the breakup of the relationship. But the joy of it completely threw her off balance. "But how, Mike? You're married, aren't you? What kind of son would I have? How am I supposed to raise him? I can barely make a living on my own." "I'll help you. I'll get a nanny. I'll give you money. I can't get a divorce, but I will recognize the child. Please don't have an abortion. Give me a little boy, my dear." "I'll think about it," Jennifer said. And indeed, she thought for a long time. The girl went to the doctor, clarified the deadline by which she had to make a decision, and thought about what she should do. On the one hand, she realized that all the care of the child would fall on her. Mike would only be a Sunday dad. On the other hand, she loved this man so much that somewhere inside she was thinking, "I will give birth to his son. He will see how good we are together, and will definitely divorce and come to live with me through the prism of his love." There was no way Jennifer could adequately evaluate her actions. She needed to consult someone, so she called Sandy, her best friend, who by that time already had a husband and a child. "You're a piece of work," was the first thing her friend said when she heard the news from Jennifer. "And who's the daddy?" "That's not the point. That's not the point. I'm not getting married. I want an abortion, and he's telling me to keep the baby." "Are you crazy? What abortion? Of course you should have the baby. You don't know how happy it is to look at a little person who loves you for nothing. When I look at Mikey, I'm filled with love too." "Sandy, you're married. What if I have a baby and I have to raise it alone in a rented apartment with a small salary? I can't afford it." "Isn't your dad planning on helping out?" "They promised to provide." "But I can't rely on that. I don't know what anyone's saying." "I don't know, Jennifer. They say there's a bunny. There's a law, and I can't support you in your decision to have an abortion. I look at Mikey and I think, how could this be? It wouldn't be such a miracle." "Okay, thanks. At least I talked to someone. Come on, I'll keep thinking. I still don't think I should terminate the pregnancy. I haven't made up my mind yet." When Mike found out about Jennifer's pregnancy, he became even more alert and attentive. He came much more often and constantly asked what her plans were. In the end, the girl believed that the man would not abandon her with her son. And even without voicing the decision to herself, she as if by accident missed all the deadlines for abortion. "When else can I have an abortion?" she asked. Mike was very happy. "I'm going to have a son," he murmured as he nursed Jennifer back to health, giving her money for doctors and vitamins and accompanying her to checkups. Jennifer was terrified of what would happen if she had a daughter. But at the next ultrasound, the doctor confirmed her father's hunch. "You're having a son, Mommy," she said to Jennifer lying on the couch. Jennifer smiled. "I'm starting to believe that after the baby is born, things will get better." She took maternity leave from work, and the following spring Jennifer had a baby boy who looked a lot like Mike. She named her son Stephen. There was a dash in the father's name. "I'm definitely going to adopt him," Mike said, but only a little later. "Okay, sweetheart. Look at the little guy." The older the boy got, the less often Mike showed up at Jennifer's house, and the less money he gave her. It got to the point where she couldn't afford to buy formula for her son. So she called the man she loved. "Why are you calling me?" He got angry at the young mom. "You don't realize that if I don't show up, it means I can't. And in general, I now have financial problems. I cannot support another child. You gave birth to it. You have to raise it yourself." "Oh yeah? You said we'd raise it together. I don't have enough allowance." "I don't know what I said. I don't have time for you right now. I'll come if I can. Don't call me again." Jennifer sat by the baby's crib, quietly holding back tears so as not to wake the baby. Well, what am I going to do, she thought. I shouldn't have trusted the man, no matter how sweet the promises he made. She felt bad for herself, for her son, and for the fact that she had been so foolish to rely on a complete stranger who had deceived her and was also rude. When the girl calmed down a little, she began to think about how to live on. Marilyn was very surprised to receive a call from her apartment at an unannounced time. Usually Jennifer only called her to inform her of a rent transfer. But now was clearly a different number. Oh, my heart smells something's up, the woman thought as she picked up the phone. Hello, Jennifer. Marilyn, please excuse me. I'm having temporary financial difficulties right now. Could you please hold off on paying me this month? Oh, that's a shame. I've been planning what I'm going to use the money for, but I'll wait until a better time. Something came up. It's not a big deal. It's just that my paycheck's late at work. All right, Jennifer, just let me know when you send me the full amount. I will, Marilyn. Thank you so much. Goodbye, darling. Starling. The woman hung up the phone and, shaking her head, muttered, something must have happened after all. Entering the room, Maxim asked her, what did you say? He had just arrived to help with the move to the dacha for the summer season. No, nothing. The girl who rents my apartment asked for an extension. She says she's behind on her paycheck. You know, I was thinking, I'll leave you her phone number. You check her out sometime. Mike, okay. Just make sure there's nothing wrong with it, nothing illegal. It's her first time filming, but there's a first time for everything. Marilyn, okay, son, don't worry, I'll take care of it. I've already taken her stuff out to the elevator, so it's time to get dressed. Marilyn went to her room to put her medication in her bag and dress warmly. It was a chilly start to summer. After talking to the landlady, Jennifer immediately pulled out the money she had set aside for rent, got dressed and went with the baby to the store to get formula. But this is only temporary, just for once, she thought. What to do next? To get a job, you need a nanny. But what kind of nanny if I can't even buy pantyhose on my paycheck? When she returned with boxes of food for her son and put him to sleep in the stroller on the balcony, the girl picked up her phone and dialed a number. Emily, hello, I'd like to get off vacation next month. That's fine, Jennifer. We're waiting for you. But we're not getting any pay raises, and we're running out of money. Yes, but I need a nanny to go to work. Well, I'm sorry, I can't make you happy. We're having problems at the company right now, even layoffs. You're lucky you're legally exempt, but frankly, it's not good. What if I go part-time and find a part-time job somewhere else? They won't fire me. Why would you and I have to go public with this? We won't tell anyone. And besides, you'll have child support. It's a small amount, but it'll be a better income. And, you know, I can write you a quarterly welfare check. I don't think it would be a bad idea. What about layoffs? The financial aid is under another article, so one can't interfere with the other. Oh, thank you, Emily. Then I'll come to work with you soon, of course. Jennifer worked as an assistant in the economics department. She had no specialized training. When she joined the company as a secretary, her smartness was quickly noticed, and she was offered the position with a small salary increase. Jennifer was pleased, because she preferred to work with papers, rather than to meet people and prepare tea and coffee for the bosses. And the first person who helped her to get used to the new place was Emily, the head of the HR department. Jennifer was grateful to her and was always happy to come into her office. Now, after the conversation, she hung up the phone and felt ashamed of her request. But perhaps Emily was the only person in whose decency Jennifer was sure. In the evening, when the girl had just put her son to bed, the front doorbell suddenly rang loudly. Well, who has brought resented inwardly the girl? Son, after all, will wake up in her soul. There was still a lingering hope that Mike, who had not appeared or called for more than a month. On the threshold stood an unfamiliar man about 30 to 35 years old. Jennifer, hi. I'm Ben, Amber's son. Hi, come on in. I'm sorry I didn't call. My mom left me your number. Well, I was just driving by, so I thought I'd stop by. Maybe you're home. Are you here for the money? I thought we agreed with your mom about an extension. No, I'm not here for the payment. She said she put it off. It's just that I took her to the cottage the other day, and she asked me to stop by and see if I needed any help. A leaky faucet or a loose knob. It's an old apartment, after all. That's when the baby cried in the room. Oh, wait a second, Jennifer rushed to her son. She rocked the baby's crib and he calmed down. You have a baby? Surprised son of the hostess. And here I was making a fuss. I woke him up. I'm sorry, but my mom didn't warn me. Jennifer lowered her eyes. When she'd met Amber, it had only been about renting an apartment. She'd said, oh, it's so nice that you're alone. No dogs or kids or anything like that. Otherwise they'll trash the whole apartment, chew up the furniture. The kids will draw on the wallpaper. I'm alone, Jennifer laughed at the time. And I don't plan to have any dogs or kids yet. That's fine, the woman said. Then I'll be happy to rent you a place to live, and she signed the contract. Son, Jennifer answered Max's question. He's 5 months old. Your mom doesn't know yet. I didn't have the heart to tell her. Congratulations. Are you going to live here as a family now, or are you going to move in with your husband? I don't have a husband, Jennifer said, and went all in. That's why I asked your mom to postpone the payment. I have nothing but my allowance right now. But I've already made a deal, and next month I'll start working. Then I'll be able to pay off my debt and keep paying. And who will take care of the child? The man asked. A nanny, probably, sighed the girl. But I haven't found one yet. They all ask for my salary for this, and I still have to pay you and feed my son something. But I'll definitely manage, don't you think? Just wait a bit, I'll pay you. I'm looking for a second job. Maybe I'll clean the entrances of our house. Then I won't need a nanny. I can babysit for my neighbor. Can I sit down? Max asked, and without waiting for permission, settled on a bench in the hallway. And what do you work? Assistant economist. We have a good company. I've already talked to the head of the personnel department. She promised me a quarterly financial aid, and I can leave work early. How much do you expect to make, if it's no secret? Jennifer gave me a number. Do you think it's enough money for 2 people with a baby to live in a rented apartment? Max wondered. It will be difficult, but I can do it, she answered. Parents, relatives, friends, finally? Make the father pay child support. Jennifer shook her head negatively. He's married. He has 2 daughters. He didn't care about aesthetics. And when you decided to have a baby, excuse me, what were you thinking? Mike asked for a son and promised he'd help and adopt him. And you believed him? I see. Well, can we see the hero of this soap opera? Jennifer nodded and quietly led Ben into the room where the round baby was sleeping and smiling on the couch, covered with blankets so he wouldn't fall. The man couldn't hold back a smile, reached out a hand to him, then pulled it away and walked back out into the hallway. What am I going to do with you? He looked anxiously around the apartment. Jennifer. I think she'll be kicked out of the apartment soon, she asked quietly. Can I stay here for a couple more months, till I find another place to live? I don't have anywhere else to go, only to the street. No, I won't kick you out. I'm thinking about how to handle this situation. Let's do this. I won't say anything to my mom yet. For the next couple of months, I'll pay it myself and tell her as if you did it. But in return, you'll give me the coordinates of your work so I can see if you're telling me the truth. I'm sorry, but these are the times. Of course I understand. And then when you get a job, get a nanny and get your life together, then we can talk about payments again. Okay. Chuckles, thank you so much, Ben. I didn't expect you to be so understanding. I thought you'd just send me out the door. I want to help you regain your faith in people. Not everyone's a scoundrel like your Mike. He's not a scoundrel. He just can't leave his family for us. It's a testament to his integrity. Yeah, it's his integrity that made him choose to leave you. Okay, I hate to talk about him. Here's my phone number. If you need any help, call me and I'll try to solve the problem. Have a good day. The man walked out the door. Goodbye. And thank you again. Back home, Ben had dinner and tried to read the news on the internet. There was only one problem: he didn't realize what he was reading because he was mentally going back to his conversation with Jennifer. No, it was understandable that a naive fool trusted some scoundrel. But how on earth does a guy like that get around? At home, he's probably a good family man. Tells stories from work, goes for walks with his daughters, and does not think that someone can do the same to them when they grow up. And now she's got to get out of it. In a week to visit her, at least bring diapers and baby food. It'll be easier. But at the end of the week, Jennifer called. "Hello, Ben. You said that if something broke." Yeah. What's wrong, Jennifer?" "The washing machine. It's broken, and it won't heat the laundry. And I'm like a handicap without it, aren't I?" "But you understand." "I understand perfectly." "When will you be home tomorrow?" "All day." "Where will I go?" "I haven't gotten a job yet, and I haven't found a nanny yet. I'll take the baby for walks. But if necessary, he can sleep in the stroller on the balcony." Right, Ben's mind flashed. She needs a crib, too. Her son sleeps on her couch. Our old, beat-up couch, the one his father remembers. "First of all, don't wait up for me. Just do your thing. Just make some room around the car." "All right." "Okay, I got it." Ben worked at a publishing house where most of the staff worked remotely, only occasionally coming into the office. However, they all shared a chat room where he'd thrown in the need for a crib. Within a couple hours, he received 3 offers to give it away for free with pictures. After looking at them carefully, he chose one. Ben drove up the same day and picked up the crib. In addition, he received several rattles, a pacifier, and other baby accessories. Heading to the office, he was pleased with the future surprise for Jennifer and her son. In addition, he also ordered a washing machine with delivery. To put in a new one, the old one was already more expensive to repair. "Ben, did you get married?" Jacob, an old acquaintance and editor of the publishing house, greeted him. "No. Why would you say that? What about the chat room newsletter? Or do you need this as a prop?" "No, it's not for me. It's just some girls I know who need help." "Girls? But that means you're getting married soon," his colleague winked at him. "I didn't think so," Ben smiled. On Saturday, as soon as the delivery guy called and said they'd be there in an hour and a half, Ben rushed to Jennifer's house. She was just feeding her son when he arrived, laden with a disassembled crib and other things. "Don't get distracted by me," the young man said to the girl. "I'll get everything out of the car, and only then I'll do the washing machine." "Okay," Jennifer nodded, continuing to coax the baby to eat the applesauce she had just made from the last remaining apple. And in good conscience, she should have had time to go to the store today. But she didn't bother telling Ben that. The man brought in all his things, undressed, and made his way to the room. Jennifer could hear him moving furniture from the kitchen and wondered, not realizing what he was doing. "Maybe Amber asked me to find something," she thought. Then Jennifer heard the sound of an instrument, took her son in her arms, and went with him into the room. Ben had assembled the crib and fastened the sides to it. There was already a crib mattress and blanket inside. "Ben, why? We were doing just fine without a crib. It's just a waste. You're not going to need a crib anytime soon, are you? At least until the age of 2, a child shouldn't be ruining his spine sleeping on an unequipped couch." "I didn't spend any money. My coworkers gave it to me for free. Their daughter had grown up. They didn't know where to put her." And a lot of other rattles. The man nodded at the big bag in the corner. And in the hallway, 2 packages of diapers. "These are a gift from me. Put them back where you keep them. Oh, and by the way, there's a bunch of different jars of purees in there. I didn't know which ones you wanted, so I got a few different ones. But I see you've already eaten." "Ben, thank you. But how am I going to pay you back?" "Why do you keep talking about money? You don't have to pay me back. They're all gifts." That's when the intercom buzzed. "Here comes the washing machine. Today you'll have everything in perfect order." The movers lifted the machine to the floor, disconnected, and took the old one. "I decided it was easier to replace it than to repair it at the store. It's a promotion. They take the old machine back to recycle field. So I saved money," Ben explained. "Here's the manual for you to study for now. I'm going to go plug it in. By yourself." Jennifer was surprised. "By myself, of course. It's a simple thing to do. Why waste money on installation?" 3 hours after Ben's arrival, the new, almost silent washing machine was running. Archie sat in the assembled crib, which Jennifer had made up, and played with the new rattles. The girl and her son were drinking tea in the kitchen. You see, the man smiled. "Life is getting better, and when you get a job, it will be beautiful. But I can't find a nanny for reasonable money. They are all some governesses come across, who promise to talk to him in 3 languages, to teach him. and I just need to feed him and take him for walks, at least on the balcony. Maybe you're looking there today? Try among pensioners to look for those who have just gone on vacation. They still have enough strength and can watch the child, and their demands are not cosmic. Where to find them? You will not rush to every elderly person on the street with such a question. Ask at work. And to do that, you have to go out there, and I can't go out there until Stepa's settled in. It's a vicious circle. Let me ask my friends in the chat room if anyone has such acquaintances. I can't promise results. We've already found a crib. Maybe we can find a nanny too. Thank you, Ben, but I don't feel comfortable asking you. You've done so much already, and we're nothing to you. You're my long-term investment. I'm interested in you keeping this apartment and paying rent. So consider it an investment in my secure old age. What old age? You're still a young man. That's something to think about when you're young. But I'm 32 now, so I'm not as young as you might think. I'm 23, she smiled. Oh, it's bedtime after all. I'm going to put him on the balcony. We'll go for a walk. Or maybe you and I will go for a walk in the park. He sleeps in the stroller there, and we'll go for a walk. Do you have time for that? Why not? It's the weekend. Get some fresh air? Jennifer started hesitantly. All right then. You get dressed, Archie, and I'll get the stroller out, Ben said before she could finish. When Ben entered the office, he saw Jacob walking toward him with a smile. He's going to ask about getting married again, he braced himself. Ben, are you considering men as nannies? Ben hesitated. He and Jennifer hadn't discussed that option. I don't know that you want to offer yourself, he smiled back. What about publishing? No, I wouldn't mind. But I've got a lot of unfinished business to take care of, so I'll hold off for now. But I have an older brother, a retired lieutenant colonel in the security services, retired a long time ago. He used to work part-time, but now he says he's fed up. I want something more peaceful. He stayed at home for 6 months and howled. Kids are grown up, no grandchildren. He doesn't like technology. He used to like to go camping with the school. But now, to get a job there, you have to collect a lot of different certificates. And he's not in good health. Jacob continued. I was at home, humming at your message. He's excited about it. He wants to try it. Well, I don't know if taking care of a small child is a relaxing thing to do. So maybe you'll give it a shot. I'll talk to the baby's mom. Good, because I don't know how she'll react, Ben said. Sure. He has a car, by the way. He can bring it in and drive it if necessary. I can do that. Okay, I'll tell him. Robert was not only older than his brother, but taller and broader in the shoulders. He limped a little and came to meet the mother of a possible ward. When asked about the limp, the man always answered evasively. His car pulled into the backyard of the house with difficulty. Ben, of course, was also present. Jennifer's reaction to the suggestion of taking a man as a babysitter was calm. I guess we're just used to the nanny always being a woman, but a man can do the same thing. And it's definitely easier for him to carry a stroller with a baby. Let's get acquainted. If Archie's not scared, why not? Archie not only wasn't scared, but even smiled when the older man took him in his arms and touched his eyes and nose with his fingers. Wow, he's so cooperative. Robert laughed softly. So are we friends now? Archie started babbling something back and blowing bubbles. It was the first time Jennifer had ever seen a child react to a stranger in such a way, and she smiled. What about money? She asked the future babysitter, explaining the child's daily routine to him. Well, Jennifer, for me it's more pleasure than money. But I'm just getting a job. I can't even pay a full-time nanny at the average rate. So you'll pay half. Ben and I will talk about it. What's Ben got to do with it? The girl was surprised. He's my son and the nanny. But it's none of my business, Robert interrupted. I'm sorry, for God's sake. I'm an old school man, and I simply can't take money from a woman, much less from such a charming girl. You'll talk to Ben about how much you're willing to pay me. He'll pay well. Otherwise, I'll take any amount. I understand a week, 2 weeks, a month. We'll see how it goes. This is new to me, too. My wife raised my kids. I was always on duty or on assignment. And now the kids are grown. My wife's gone. Oh, what am I talking about? So if my services suit you, and I realize that I can cope, then we'll discuss the final scene. And if not, I'm sorry. But I'll find someone else to replace me so you won't be left without a nanny. Thank you, Jacob, Ben said. It's a deal. Can we do one more thing? Jacob asked. What's that? Just call me Bob. It's awkward. Are you much older? You can call me Bob, and you can call me Bob on a first-name basis. That's what my wife used to call me when she was angry, he smiled. Alas, they've gotten a little crazy. That means I was wrong about something. Why wouldn't you be? Ben wondered. I don't know, it's just the way it's been since we met. They called me Rybakov at school, and at the college too. Or just Okop. She didn't like it, so she came up with a consonant. All right, we'll agree on that, Ben said. You'll just be grandfather to the baby. Is that okay? Of course it's okay. I don't think he'll understand it now. That's good. Why don't you show me how to pack for a walk and we'll go for a walk? You've got a nice park nearby. Bob, with the stroller, proudly stepped forward, and behind him, Jennifer and Ben walked side by side, taking their time. What do you think of the candidate? Ben asked. First impressions are very favorable. If he can handle the baby as well as he does during the day, I don't think we'll find a better old lady. I liked him too. He and his brother look alike, by the way. Only he struggled to find the words, but finally came up with one. What's his? Monumental. Reliable then? Jennifer smiled. Except I still don't understand why you're helping me. I explained it to you last time. It's a long-term investment. But seriously, I realize I can help. Why don't you? Especially since the labor is minimal. I'm the one paying him. If I find out you're paying, I'll find another apartment and leave. All right. Don't worry. Everything will be just the way you want it. Finally, Jennifer went to work. First thing she did was go to Emily's with a box of chocolates. Oh, it's so good to see you, Jennifer. The woman was so happy. Come in, the candy is just in time. Now with you, we will drink tea, and you tell me about your life. How is your baby? Did you find a nanny? I found one, the girl nodded. But the nanny is a man, ex-military or something else. I do not know, frankly speaking. He was so caring. Memorized everything from the first time. He watches over the child. So sometimes I'm ashamed that I don't look like that. Anyway, we spent a month together looking at each other to see if we're right for each other. And? How's the kid reacting? He likes it a lot. He shuts up in Robert Alexeyevich's arms and sleeps peacefully. And where did you find such a treasure? Long story. Jennifer waved her hand. Kind people helped. That's right. There are more good people than there are good people. That's why you have to rely on them. How are things going at the company? No, I'm just retiring and handing things over. I briefly told my replacement about you. She says the new CFO is coming in. She'll take it up with him. Jennifer said the money for such help comes from the social fund. But in her opinion, that didn't convince Amber. So we're getting a new supervisor. I mean, how long can we go on without a CFO? I mean, we have his former deputy acting CFO. Apparently someone's not happy with him. They say they're looking for a new candidate. All right, apply while you still can. They'll get you the money. Thank you so much for everything and for them, and for the human attitude, Amber said. How long do you work until? Until the end of the month. And what are you planning to do after that? A vegetable garden in the country, Amber said. I don't like gardens. Mike laughed. You can quietly. And then you cannot pull it out, yes. And the son, apparently it was passed on. He and his wife and daughter spend all summer. And I would rather be in the city, in the parks, to walk, cafes, go to the museum. Well, to be honest, I don't know yet. Why don't you come and visit us? You'll get to know each other. At least look at someone you actually saved with your help. Don't exaggerate. But if you invite us, we'll definitely drop by sometime. Can I write down your address? Or do you have a different one? No, it's still the same. You have your phone number. Call me if there's anything I can do for you. Thank you. I hope you don't need IT. Jennifer was sad all day. She had developed a very good relationship with the head of HR, and she was sorry to see her go. And these musings now and then thoughts of how she was going to get on with her life crept in. Well, nothing. The new boss will appear. I'll go to him myself, Ask him. He's a human being. He should understand. We can try to look for another job. Maybe I should talk to Ben. I mean, come on, the slightest problem I have, I think he'll think I'm on his ass. I'll manage on my own. All these thoughts were interrupted by Archie's morning call. Jennifer, I'm sorry, for God's sake, but I'm sick. It's been a long time since I've been sick. I'm actually very hardened. Temperature's 39 today. Well, I can't go to the baby's house in case it's contagious, sure. Sure, Jennifer reassured him. I'll take the day off work. Feel better. I really need you. And Archie, even more, I'll make it quick. I'll make it quick. Okay. I'm sorry I let you down. No need to apologize, Archie. Well, you've been a great help to me for almost a year. Jennifer was about to object, but suddenly she ran out of steam. After losing part of her income in the form of financial aid, it would have been nice. But she was ashamed to even bring it up in front of herself. We'll talk about it later, she said into the phone. Get well. That weekend, when Ben arrived and Jennifer complained to him about her forced vacation without pay, he asked, "Do you want me to pay this month's bonus? Why are you all about the money?" Jennifer replied, "You'd better go over there and ask him how he's feeling. Although I think if I call him, he'll take it as a request to come see the baby sooner." "Okay, I'll talk to him. Don't worry." "Yes, I also cut my salary at work." Suddenly the girl complained to him. "How?" Ben was indignant. "They have no right. According to our labor laws, it's forbidden. Only if you reduce the working day." "No, I had financial aid." "Remember, I told you that the head of the personnel department wrote it out to me. Well, she retired, and the new one won't do it without the CFO's approval." "And what?" He said no. "He hasn't started work yet. He's new. He'll start on the 3rd. What if you go talk to him yourself?" "I've already thought about it. I guess I'll have a look at him to see if he's even in my position or not." "Hang in there, Jennifer. Maybe you should look for another job. I've thought about that too. But even looking at what I'm making in this position, I'm not being offered anything else. I'm not good at anything else. Jennifer, I want you to know that if you decide to quit, I'll help you out financially while you look for a new job." "Ben, I already owe you everything. I don't even want to consider it." On Sunday, Emily came to visit. They sat in the kitchen and drank tea with a cake that the woman had baked for Jennifer and Archie. To be honest, I'm not much of a cook, but it's our family recipe. And everyone said it was delicious. Of course, maybe they're flattered, but it's better than store-bought, Emily said. "Emily, you really are an amazing hostess." "Thank you so much," Jennifer said. "How's retirement life treating you?" "You know, I was worried it would be boring. But now I don't even have any free time. I was saving time for you at 12 today. Didn't you promise to introduce him to my boy's toy?" Archie brought the woman all his toys and showed her how to play with them. Emily didn't get to play with him until Jennifer took him out to rest. Come, I'll do the dishes here," the woman told her. "Oh, come on, don't." "Yes, you do. You should rest too." When Archie was asleep, the women settled down in the kitchen. And Emily said seriously, "Actually, I've come for one more thing. I want to warn you about your future boss. They say he's an excellent specialist, but he's not much of a man, but I don't know him personally. It's just a rumor. But you should be careful about opening up to him. Let HR ask him for you." "Okay," Jennifer shrugged. "What can he do? The only thing he can do is fire me. But then he'd have to pay severance. I don't know what he'll do, but don't trust him." "Okay. I promise everything will be fine, Emily. Don't worry." At that moment, Jennifer heard the sound of a key in the keyhole and the door opening. "I wonder who it is," the girl thought, stepping out into the hallway. Ben and Jacob were the only ones with keys. Ben wouldn't have arrived without a call. Jacob stood on the doorstep. "Jennifer, I'm sorry, for God's sake," he whispered. "I know Archie's asleep at this hour, and I didn't call so I wouldn't wake him." "It's okay," she nodded. "Why are you here?" "Because of Amber. I feel guilty. I wish I could give you half a day off." Jacob walked into the kitchen and stopped in the doorway. "I didn't realize you had company." "Hello, I'm honored to introduce myself." Jacob stood in front of Emily. "Emily," she smiled and gestured him to a chair. "Please have a seat." Archie and I just met today. She looked at Jennifer with a smile. Emily and I worked at the same company, and we decided to meet today. I hope I'm not interrupting anything. Of course not, the woman smiled and set the third mug on the table. So you two aren't working together anymore? Jacob asked. I'm ashamed to admit it, but I'm retired. Emily lowered her eyes flirtatiously. Jennifer grinned at the spectacle being played out in front of her by people twice her age. What's there to be ashamed of? I've been retired for 15 years, and I'm not ashamed of it at all. I can say of such a fine lady that retirement is the beginning of life, Jacob said. I was just telling Jennifer that I don't have much free time yet. I'm reading books, learning computer programs, going on field trips. You know, all the things I've been putting off for so many years because of work. How did your family feel about that? Jacob asked. What family? Emily waved her hand. Her husband had passed away a long time ago, and the children were grown, independent. I don't like that. I don't like that. No, well, you speak my words. I slapped myself on the knee. God with it, I understand you perfectly well. And she listened to the conversation between her older friends and found much in common. Then Archie woke up and she retired to her son's room, leaving the two of them alone. Jennifer, we thought we'd go for a walk, Jacob asked her, peering into the room. Do you mind? Of course not. Don't you need me, Jennifer? The man winked at her. There's no third person. I thought the third was Archie. Jennifer also smiled. The children are beyond competition. It was at this time that the baby saw his babysitter and reached for him. The morning newsletter at work delighted Jennifer with the news. Dear colleagues, you are invited to join us today at 11:00 a.m. in the conference room. There will be an introduction to the new CFO of our company. He will tell you about the principles of his work and discuss further plans for the development of our company. Well, at last rejoiced the girl. At least some certainty. And then to live with the unknown tomorrow is worse than ever. There was excitement in the women's restroom. All the young female employees were tidying up before the meeting to seduce him. Are we going to do it in a bunch? The married ladies asked them. Or is he single? Married. Married, confirmed one of the girls. But they say he's no stranger to the female sex. You can be a mistress to begin with. And then, who knows, suddenly you'll be a wife. Jennifer only chuckled inwardly as she listened to these conversations. She'd been down this road, and it hadn't ended well. No, of course I have Archie, and that's fine. But the rest of it? No way, just strictly business negotiations, she thought to herself. Or quit. At 11:10, the conference room hummed quietly like a beehive as the CEO walked in, followed by William. Jennifer closed her eyes in surprise. Sorry I'm late, the CEO said. I'd like to introduce you to our new manager, Mike. He is now in charge of all financial matters. And thank goodness. Because frankly speaking, I'm tired of your wishes, he smiled. Please, Mike, you have the floor. Hello, Mike stood next to the chair and slowly looked around the room. First of all, let me say that my lateness today is an unforgivable oversight. I believe that all of us should work with the precision of a Swiss watch, as a single mechanism. That means no tardiness, no leaving early and no excuses. Only a doctor's note can influence the decision to take disciplinary action. And that, please note, frequent illness indicates that you do not take good care of your health. And with such we will not be on the way. The hall whispered. The new chief started his speech too harshly. You will ask all the questions later, he continued, interrupting some employees who raised their hands to clarify some points. Secondly, and then William hesitated, meeting Jennifer's eyes. The girl sat staring at him without taking her eyes off him. Nothing betrayed the emotions that raged in her soul. And it was not hatred, contempt, or even pity. No, she suddenly realized to herself that it was love. A hard, dependent, unreachable love that forgave him for everything he had done to her life. And if she were asked now if she would repeat that path, she would undoubtedly answer in the affirmative. William was still saying something. Jennifer looked at him and realized how much she had missed him in the partial couple of years she hadn't seen him. It was one thing to not see a person and quite another to have them reappear in your life, and seemingly faded feelings suddenly rekindle. After the meeting, everyone went to their workplaces. Since the economics department reported directly to the new director, Mike's office was in their wing, right next to Jennifer's. Jennifer sat quietly at her desk and tried to concentrate, but all her thoughts were on him. That's when her phone lit up. A text from Mike came in. "Tomorrow at 9 in my office." Jennifer couldn't believe her eyes. Reread the message and replied, "Okay," then tried to tune in to work. All night she had hardly slept at all. Jennifer would get up, walk over to her son's bed and smile, thinking, we're definitely going to be okay now. She was sure Mike wouldn't say no to her. After all, this was his only son too. Jennifer pondered what to wear to the meeting to look both businesslike and attractive, but came up with nothing. As she was getting ready in the morning, she found a short black skirt in her closet that she had once worn on dates with him and decided to wear it. Wow. "Jennifer, are you going to a business meeting today?" the mirror on the wall asked. "Yes, a very important one," she nodded. "Well, good luck then. You look great, a real modern businesswoman." Jennifer smiled and drove to work. "Come in." Mike jumped up and locked the office door behind her, so we wouldn't be interrupted. "So you work here?" "Yes," she nodded. "How did you end up at our company? Weren't you a financial analyst?" "Well, it's not far from one or the other. Circumstances worked out. It's good to see you. You're still running in the park, looking great." "No, I'm not up to it right now, but hopefully I'll be able to resume training soon." "Great, have a seat." He pointed to the couch. "Tell me about your life. How's Archie?" So he's interested in his son, too, Jennifer thought. It didn't matter what his circumstances were. "He's fine, he's growing up. We're planning to start kindergarten soon." And now with a nanny, Jennifer didn't go into details. "Wow, you can afford a nanny? Your salaries are pretty good." Jennifer sighed. "I've been meaning to talk about you." She hesitated when she felt his hand on her shoulder. Mike moved closer and whispered hotly in her ear. "I thought it had passed, but no. I want you so much. You're still beautiful. Beautiful and free." Jennifer's head was spinning. She tried to pull away, but it only made her more attracted to him. "I want you too," she said tonelessly. "Do I have a favor to ask?" Mike pulled away. Jennifer opened her mouth, but he exclaimed, "No, don't say anything yet. I have an idea. Let's play boss and secretary." He lifted her off the couch and dragged her to the middle of the office. "I am the formidable boss. Are you afraid of me? Tell me what you want. Could you give me a raise?" Jennifer said timidly, not believing this game. "What? I can't hear you." "Louder, raise my salary." She repeated a little more clearly. "But is that any way to talk to the boss? You address him as you beg him, and then you do whatever he says." A doubt stirred in Jennifer's soul. She froze. "Well, what about you?" Mike grinned. "It's just a game. Let's give it a try. Come on, express your desire. Give me a raise." "Boss," Jennifer said loudly. "But don't order it. You have to beg for it. See what the boss said? Take your skirt down. You're a subordinate, so take it off. Not like that. More erotic. How do you do it? You need me to do your bidding. So follow my instructions." Jennifer began to slowly remove her skirt, entering the game. "Dear boss, please give me a raise." "Why is that? Me and my son Archie will soon have nothing to eat." "But any favor requires a return favor. You understand, don't you? And I'm prepared to do you one. Just please give me a raise." Jennifer was so into the role that a tear rolled down her cheek. She realized that she really wanted to cry and tell Mike everything she had been through since he left. After these thoughts, tears came to her eyes from weakness or self-pity. Mike couldn't take it anymore and ran up to the half-naked girl. He was so aroused that he easily entered her and poured all the accumulated passion, standing on the carpet. Then he picked her up in his arms and carried her to the couch. They enjoyed each other's intimacy for a few more minutes. Soon the man stood up. "Time for work," he smiled at Jennifer. She nodded and began to clean herself up. All week her soul had been singing from her newfound love. Jacob noticed her mood. "Are you in love by any chance, Jennifer?" "Why are you suddenly asking that?" "It's just that I've never seen you in such a beautiful mood before. It's like you're glowing from the inside out." "No, Jacob, I didn't tell him my secrets. It's just that life is getting better, little by little. Whatever it is, I'm infinitely happy for you. I hope there will be room in this life for me as your old acquaintance." "Undoubtedly. But just don't emphasize the word old," Jennifer smiled. You have a fine age. If I had been told that before I met you, I would probably have started to refute the fact. However, a lot has changed since then. He winked enigmatically at his ward's mother. The next week, the meeting in the office was repeated, and so did the game. Although it didn't feel so new, Jennifer was more in character now, and her closeness to Mike was back on her mind. 2 weeks later, her boss left on a business trip, and Jennifer waited impatiently for his return until payday. Then she received money even less than usual. The girl came to the accounting department with a question. Mike was the one who told everyone to cut off their overtime pay, she was told. Everyone, all of them, the girls nodded. Jennifer was upset, but decided to wait until Mike arrived to clear the air. When the two of them were alone in the office again, she didn't get flirtatious and joined in the game. I got a very small paycheck here. The girls in accounting said it was your order. Yes, I told them to remove overtime pay for all employees. You work here, so that means it affects you too. But why is it your fault that you don't get everything done on time? Why should the company's money go to that? Mike, but I told you. I don't have enough money to live alone with Sandy. Right now the paycheck is below the market average. Didn't you promise me you'd give me a raise? I promised when here we are, the two of us together here when we were playing and loving each other. It's just a game. Well, you just said yourself that we were playing. Who said it was serious? But even so, haven't you realized that your son Archie and I need money? Everyone needs money. As the CFO, I know that for a fact. For that matter, you asked for it. But I didn't promise anything. I also said, do what the boss says, quid pro quo. That's the rules of the game, which we both enjoyed, by the way. That's me, isn't it? I could see you wanted me too. I made you feel good. And we live by very different rules. So you just used me, and in doing so, you cheated on me. But you used my body too. Or did you do it for money? Here's the raise I supposedly promised you. Jennifer placed the resignation letter in front of him. Sign it, she demanded. You're talking to your boss in an inappropriate tone. You're not my boss anymore, so sign the letter and I'll quit, Jennifer insisted. Mike got up from his desk, walked over and closed the door again. If you keep harassing me, I'll file a rape report with the police. Well, why be so rude? I mean, we know each other well. We even have a son. You should have thought of your son when you signed the payroll. I'm doing this for the company, not for my own personal interests. That's why I'm leaving, so you don't confuse the two, Jennifer said. What about me? Aren't you going to find yourself another fool? Don't you realize I'm having a good time with you? And I think you are too, Mike objected. It was good, but it's gone. You can't fool me indefinitely, Jennifer said. Ugh, what a word, deceive. I didn't fool anyone. You're the one who made it up. Both my promises and my deceptions, Mike objected. Are you going to sign a letter of resignation? Well, if you want to quit, sure. But why don't you take a look at this first? He pointed to his screen. And what's this I'm going to see? Are you going to promote me after all? Flashed through her mind. Why don't you take a look? Jennifer walked over to the chair and looked at the monitor. At that moment, Mike started up the video files. They showed Jennifer herself evolving in the center of the office, on the carpet, as if to music, almost like a professional dancer. She watched in horror as she removed all her clothes and underwear from below her waist, then stretched her arms toward Mike, who approached her, as if reluctantly, with his face distorted beyond recognition. Her face can be seen clearly, alas, not just her face. It's impossible to tell from the man who it is. You sneaky bastard, so you were also filming us. From where? Jennifer exclaimed. What are you talking about? It's just CCTV cameras. They're in every office. You have to take and sign an order from the CEO and then take the footage. You can do whatever you want with them. Jennifer lowered her eyes. There are plenty of programs for processing video files. Say, that worked out well, didn't it? Didn't you ever want to be an actress? All girls usually want to, and a lot of guys too. You definitely have talent, Mike said. And what do you think your new employer will say when he sees this? I won't tell you where you'll be working. Trust me. It's not hard to find out at all. You could put it on the internet and you'd be a porn celebrity. That's not a bad prospect either. Then every man in town will recognize you and make lewd propositions. So are you going to sign the application, or are you going to stay after all? When it's just me watching this movie? It's one of my favorites, by the way. I've memorized all your little gestures from it," Mike continued. "You want me and Archie to starve to death on the street? How can you think that about me? I'm just calculating all the options so you can't disappear from my sight. And what are we going to live on?" "Well, you've lived somehow before, so you'll continue to do so. So how about a statement?" Jennifer grabbed a paper off her desk with anger, tore it up and threw it in Mike's face. Then she walked out of the office and slammed the door loudly, then left the office for a nearby cafe and, locking herself in the bathroom, cried for a long time from her own powerlessness and anger at herself for being so deceived. After a while, Bob walked into the cafe. "Hi, sorry to be so abrupt, but do you know what happened to our Jennifer?" "Hello, Bob. No, what happened?" "She was so cheerful, and then she's abruptly withdrawn, walking around moody. And there's only food in the house for Archie. I haven't seen her in a long time. Is she sick?" After that walk with Archie, Bob and Emily exchanged phone numbers. The man tried not to be annoying, but sometimes called for the most unexpected reasons. For example, when he learned delicious and quick recipes for cooking potatoes, he thought that Emily didn't like to cook either. And here's 15 minutes in the microwave and such a delicious meal, finger-licking good. Or he shared news from the publishing industry, which his younger brother regularly supplied him with. "Alex told me that Shaposhnikov has a new book out. It is already planned to screen. Not interested in his work." Emily, in turn, also shared with him discoveries made on excursions or simply in her now quiet new life. And when the weather was nice, they would also meet in the park, walking and smiling at each other when they were called grandparents, and then laughing contagiously while sitting on a bench. "Well, of course, if Archie calls me grandpa, then I'm grandpa to everyone. Not being grandpa would be bad," Bob said one day. "How's that?" Emily didn't understand. "It's very simple, isn't it? I'd be a grandfather if he called me grandpa. But Archie calls grandfather that word, according to the rules of the Russian language, would be in the genitive case. Who? Grandfather. And forgive my nerdiness. Anyway, if I'm a grandfather, or even a grandfather, then since you're walking with me, you're a grandmother. I called the girls I know at my old job and found out they'd gotten a pay cut. Maybe that's why Jennifer is so upset. She just doesn't have enough money. I've told her how many times she can stop paying me, but she adamantly refuses to listen to me." Jennifer tried to refuse Emily when she called to say she was going to visit. The girl was ashamed to invite to her practically beggar's house, but the woman had insisted, and Bob had also said more than once that it would be good to meet and sit together. With the last money she had saved, Jennifer tearfully bought tea and rusks and prepared for the guests.
Bob and Emily came in together.
"Can you believe it, Jennifer? We met at the front door. Here to help carry the bags," Bob said. They started taking chicken and canned goods, jam and cakes out of the bags. "I'm sorry," Jennifer said to the guest. "I didn't have time to cook it all, so I ran to the store and bought a few little things." "Well, Emily, it looks to me like you bought the whole store in small change. What are we going to do with all this? Or are you going to live with me now?" Jennifer smiled and looked at Jacob. "I wonder why that idea never occurred to me before." "Me neither," he said, surprised. "Jennifer, I was just talking to my girls over tea," the former colleague said. "They claim that the new boss has removed overtime." Yes, the girl nodded sadly. "He says it's our own fault for not getting everything done during working hours. So the company doesn't have to pay us extra." "I'm sorry, but I know your salary," Emily said. "How are you going to live now? Maybe it's time to change jobs." Jennifer couldn't explain to good, albeit good, strangers how her father had naively caught her on the hook, and that now she couldn't change jobs. "I tried," she lied, "but I couldn't find anything suitable. So I thought you might need help," Emily continued. "So I talked to some people I know. There are at least 2 places that will hire you at 1.5 times your salary. Maybe you could try interviewing there." Jennifer realized that it was impossible to refuse, so she nodded. "Yes, of course, I'll definitely go. Thank you for your concern." Mike realized the power he now had over his subordinate and began to invite her into the office and tried to harass her there. "If you are not with me, the video will be seen by everyone," he reminded the girl every time. So far, Jennifer had managed to come up with good reasons for refusal, whether it was an illness or an important meeting. But she was well aware that soon all these excuses would cease to work. And even if he started raping her, Jennifer would have nothing to defend herself with. That upset her even more. The girl felt like she was being sucked into a swamp she couldn't get out of. But she was already so tired of this tension that she was ready to wave her hand and give up. Then Ben showed up after hours. He usually came once or twice a month, spending some time with Jennifer, Archie, and Jacob. If he was on site, sometimes the four of them would all go for a walk and Ben would leave. This time he arrived late at night after work when Jacob was gone. Archie was asleep, and Jennifer was lying on the couch watching some channel on the TV, thinking about something of her own. Ben entered the apartment so quietly that Jennifer found him when he was already standing in the room. "Oh, hi," she smiled. "Did something happen?" "Yes," the man nodded. "We need to talk. Let's go to the kitchen." When they sat down at the table, he continued. "Jacob came to see me. He gave me a long explanation about Emily, about the empty refrigerator, about your paycheck being cut. All I got out of it was that for some reason you wouldn't leave this job, even though you had other good offers. I'm not retracting what I said about helping you, but I still want to ask why. Is it your desire to sit on the neck of others, or is there some other reason?" And abruptly patience burst, and Jennifer nodded. "There are. But when am I going to tell you about them? I can't. It would be like I'm putting my problems on you again. And besides, I'm really embarrassed." "Ashamed of what?" "My behavior, my naivete, the fact that I'm using you and Jacob. Even though I know exactly how bad it is and that it's wrong. So you feel guilty. And that's why you refuse to tell me everything."
Jennifer nodded again.
"Then imagine that tomorrow Jacob and I were gone. You'd be alone with your secret. What would you do?" "I don't know." "I'd throw myself in front of a train," she said sadly. "So you're ready to give up your life, but you're not ready to share it with me." Jennifer sighed and said softly, "I'm being blackmailed." Ben was questioningly silent. If he had asked clarifying questions or inquired, the girl would probably have withdrawn. But he remained silent and looked expectantly at Jennifer. "My new boss." Jennifer closed her eyes and said in a muffled voice, "He's Archie's father." Ben had 1,000 questions. How can you blackmail the mother of your child when you don't live with them and haven't even acknowledged your son? But he restrained himself and continued to remain silent. Jennifer sighed and began to tell. "When he came, he summoned me, and we were together again. He was so attentive. Then he cut everyone's pay by canceling overtime. And when I wanted to quit, he showed me a video." Tears came out of the girl's eyes. "He recorded everything. He had video surveillance. He hid himself, but I'm on it in great detail. He said he'd send it to his employer or put it on the website so everyone would know what I was like. How's Archie going to grow up with a mom like that? And he knows where we live. And I'm afraid that if I quit, he'll be watching me. He's cut my pay here, and he's always calling me to his office. He makes himself patient, he tries, but I still find reasons to refuse. This can't go on much longer. I'll either have to accept it, or... It's none of my business, but I want to understand why you want to be with him again, after he left you and your son Ben interrupted. I saw him for the first time in almost 2 years, and I realized I still loved him. He was all attentive, just like the first time. I thought he'd come back to us. There's nothing like that on any show. You should really get out of there and run for your life. I'm ready to, but I can't. Do you still love him?" Jennifer looked up at Ben with tears in her eyes.
"I hate him. I'd probably kill him. He disgusts me. I shake every time I hear his voice, and even when he calls me into the office."
"So I take it you're willing to walk away if he stops threatening to release the video?" "Of course I lie awake nights thinking about how to do it, but I can't think of anything. It's either kill him or kill myself. Either way, Archie will be an orphan."
The girl cried again. "I told you that you could come to me for help. Why didn't you do it right away?"
"I was fine at first. And when the tape came out, I'm ashamed, Ben. I mean, you're a stranger in this."
"Did it ever occur to you that blackmail is a felony? I mean, you can punish him yourself, threaten him with the police, after all."
Jennifer tried to explain herself. She said that Mike had threatened to spread the videotape and then she'd get good lawyers. She's still going to lose, the scoundrel. Okay, let's see who else loses. Sandy's advice was to go to the clinic on Monday and take a sick day. But that meant less income. But it'll get your nerves back in order. Yes, it's difficult, but but you can't say no at this time. Jennifer had a question. Out of what funds was Sandy paying God's mom? Jennifer took out a loan. How would she pay it back? Jennifer shrugged her shoulders. She doesn't. She doesn't have the means to pay it back. If she loses her job, she won't lose anything. But if she changes jobs, how? That's something to think about. When Jennifer went on sick leave, she realized that Ben was right about one thing. She was much calmer. She was out of the circle of constant unpleasant thoughts. The girl was listed in the company, but she was protected from Mike's attacks and threats, and she still didn't know what she would do next. Right now she had a break, and it was helping Jennifer recover a little. On Saturday, Ben, Jacob, and Emily showed up on the doorstep of Jennifer's apartment. "Jennifer, get Archie ready to go for a walk," Jacob ordered. "Emily will go to the park with him, and they will stay behind. They have much to discuss." Without raising her eyes, the girl dressed her son and handed him over to the care of her former co-worker. As the door closed behind them and everyone else made their way to the kitchen, Ben said, "I'm sorry, but I had to tell Jacob something. We can't do this without his help." "Don't worry, girl, I brought more scoundrels to light," the older man said. "I've been investigating for over 20 years for a reason." Jennifer looked at Jacob. "You? Yeah, didn't you know? I thought you were ex-military."
There are no exes like me, he smiled. Now let's discuss our actions.
The same day Jennifer returned from her sick leave, she got a call from Mike. "Please come into my office in an hour."
Okay, Mike. I'll come over, the girl said, so that those around her could hear her.
She sorted out the files left over from her absence. Then she wrote an email, replied in Messenger, and then took the first folder she could find and walked with a businesslike stride to her boss's office. Knocked on the office, heard a loud come in and opened the door. Come in, Mike," as usual, got up from his seat and went to lock the door behind the girl. She turned around and watched intently while he did so. "I brought you some," she began. The man pointed to the nightstand. "You can pick it up later." "Where have you been for so long? I missed you so much." He began to come closer and closer. Jennifer could barely contain the unpleasant shiver. Finally, his hands touched her clothes. He left the jacket in place, ran his hands lower down her stomach to her skirt. "You dress like that for me today. Do you want what I want?" The girl remained silent, and Mike took it as agreement. When he was about to unzip her skirt, Jennifer suddenly said in a harsh voice, "Don't do that. I don't want to." "Well, what do you want, you silly girl?" "After all, I can see it. I want you." "No, you're wrong. I'm asking you to let me go and sign my resignation letter." Mike recoiled sharply from her. "What? Or is my memory gone? I still have the video on my desktop. 2 clicks of the mouse and everyone around here will know what you're like." "I'm not." "Yeah, but only I know that, and I'm not going to tell anyone. I can keep a secret. Especially when there's an obedient girl around. Come on, don't be stubborn. We'll be good together." And he reached for her again. "Sign the application. And then you'll be undressing already." "Are you serious? You think that's going to stop me?" "I'm serious, Mike. There's my statement on the nightstand. Sign it and then do what you want." "What if I want you?" "I said you want me." Then it was a deal. Mike took the paper, put his sprawling signature on it, and put it back. "But you'll only go to the nightstand through me and what I want," he said. "And when you and I are done and you leave your workplace, I will, as I said before, send the video to all interested parties. That will guarantee that when I come to visit you and your son, you won't kick me out. Why is that? Because I'll be the only person who knows the truth about you. Everyone else will turn away, and then you'll belong to me. Isn't it enough that I'm with you now? Why send out more videos?" Jennifer asked. "Just once?" "No, of course not. I want you to be with me as long as I want you to be with me, and only with me, so no one else will ever come near you. But you have a way out in a statement, just like last time. And no one but you and me will know about the existence of this erotic masterpiece." Saying this, Mike walked over to the girl and started undressing her. Jennifer didn't move and thought. But suddenly a siren sounded and the internal radio came to life. "Attention. Fire alarm. Evacuation. Everyone, evacuate the building immediately. Please do not use elevators, take the stairs." Attention. Fire alarm. What the hell? Mike swore, looking at the radio. I thought it wasn't working. Thank God it does, Jennifer smiled inwardly. That's what I thought. There was a knock on the office door. Mike out. There's a fire. Jennifer began to quickly pull up her skirt, which Mike had managed to unbutton. He grabbed his briefcase and ran to the door, opened it, and sprinted out of the office. Jennifer calmly went to the nightstand, picked up the application, and also, without hurry, went away. The play is over, she thought as she walked down the stairs with everyone else. While the firemen were inspecting the building and allowing everyone to return to their workplaces, Jennifer stealthily got into Ben's car, which was parked around the corner, and drove to the police station. There she wrote a statement, attached evidence, and returned to the office. 2 hours afterward, a police car pulled up to the building. 3 officers got out, showed their documents, and went up to the floor where the CFO's office was located. There they showed them, but he's not here right now. It doesn't matter to us, replied one of the policemen. What's the matter? The CEO approached as the uniformed men were taking the system unit out of Mike's office. Don't interfere with the investigation. One of them pushed him away with his hand. But there are trade secret documents in there. I sympathize. Are you interfering with the work of the police right now? The director backed off. No, I just wanted to understand what happened. The mystery of the investigation. Perhaps your employee will tell you. He's not back yet. All the worse for him. After lunch, Jennifer took her boss's signed application to HR. Mike apologized profusely for losing it in the paperwork. But here it is, signed 2 weeks ago. So have my paperwork ready starting tomorrow. I don't work here. We won't have time for that, the HR girl said. But it's not my problem. Make a note in the employment record. I can't give it to you. Send an order to the accounting department so that they made the calculation. I'll come back for the rest later. I've got some paperwork to get to my new job. Before leaving, Jennifer once again looked in the personnel department, took her documents, and with a victorious smile left the office. My girl, you're just a born actress, were the words that greeted Jennifer Jacob when she got home from work. I've seen the video. There's no doubt about blackmail, harassment, and a couple of other questionable actions. And if they can find something on the computer for the economic crimes unit to pick on, this scumbag won't have a care in the world to get his ass out of the shit she's in. Thank you. Such a great hidden camera on your jacket lapel and good quality recording. The girl smiled at him. Of course, it's a little illegal. Jacob sighed. But my former subordinates won't cling to such trivialities either. When Ben told Jacob about Jennifer's situation, he was indignant. Why didn't you tell me before? Who would do something like that right away? So much time had been wasted because of that. He got miniature recording devices hidden in a woman's brooch through former colleagues. He contacted the fire inspector on behalf of the investigation team and detailed a scenario for the main character. Jennifer, your #1 job is to report to me as soon as you go into the office. And task #2 is to stall for time without giving him a chance to jump you. Okay, I don't know how I'm going to do that. I want to tear him into 1,000 little pieces. I'm sure for your future, and more importantly Archie's future, you'll be able to contain yourself. Will you? Jennifer smiled. I'll try. The rest was a matter of technique, getting the fire alarms to go off, kicking everyone out of the building, arranging time with the investigator to take a statement and camera footage, sending a team to confiscate the computer. It took a little longer than planned. But by the end of the day, it was clear that Ben and Jacob had managed to get the girl out of the trap that love, trust, and perhaps her own stupidity had put her in. Jennifer got a job at one of the companies she was invited to on Emily's recommendation, and gradually began to come to her senses and pay off her loan debt. This is called Sophia Loren Amber led Jacob over to a dark maroon rose in her makeshift rose garden. I can see why the man smiled. So much dignity and beauty. Yes, the woman agreed. And the burrow is the same, requires more care than others. Let's go to the table. Well, did you take a walk in the garden? Emily looked at Jacob, smiling. Oh, and by the way, I was introduced to Sophia Loren. What did you say? I said she was beautiful, but my heart went out to another woman. I said she was beautiful, but my heart went out to another woman. I wonder who that is. You, my Amber, he concluded, hugging the woman. I see all the men at the grill are crazy about her, Emily laughed. At that moment, Archie ran up to Amber. Grandma Emily, let's go. Let's go where, dear? The child waved his hand uncertainly. The older woman took him by the hand, and the baby led her to the honeysuckle table, where Jennifer was gathering treats for the table. Golden boy. Jennifer, why did you keep him a secret for so long? I was afraid you wouldn't like the fact that I had a baby. After all, you only rented the apartment to me. No kids, no pets. Remember? I remember. And I'm not going back on my word. But I'm not so old that I don't realize that life moves on and changes will happen. Your Archie is like a grandson to me. I don't know if Ben will ever give me one of his. Amber looked at her son, who was grilling kebabs by the grill and talking to Alec. I asked to come, Jacob's brother explained. I wanted to see who you were buying the baby clothes for, but also his brave mother, of course, who wasn't afraid to take Jacob as her son's nanny. Don't you have a reason to change your plans now? Ben obediently began turning the kebabs. If I were a dozen years younger, he continued, I would definitely follow your charming mother. And if I were younger, then for the mom of this charming baby. I don't see what you have to lose. Ben lifted his head, looked at Jennifer, and waved back at her. The girl sent him an air kiss. He traced the gestures with his eyes and sighed. Well, that just leaves your mom. Anthony was returning home from important negotiations. His business class car was driving confidently along the road. Meanwhile, the businessman was looking out the window and thinking about the events of the past day. The deal with foreign partners, on which he had so counted on, had almost failed. The French partners had decided at the last minute to drastically change the terms. The French partners decided at the last minute to abruptly change the terms of the agreement between them and demanded a percentage of profits twice the amount they had originally agreed on. Anthony had barely managed to settle the matter, and in fact, he had just bought himself a little more time before he would actually have to give a final answer. Anthony stood at the traffic lights and involuntarily rubbed his face with his hands, as if he was trying to shake off all his worries and anxiety about the future of the company. To think about it, he was only 28, and he was already the head of a large media empire which had several branches in America and already 4 in other countries. Naturally, foreign partners immediately became active, wanting to get a bigger share in such a profitable enterprise. So Anthony had to spend all his time at work, trying to put things in order. The most frustrating thing is that the young man did not even have a lover to be able to distract from all the complexities of the work process on love and the joy of relationships. It turned out so not because Anthony was betrayed by someone or he experienced a painful parting. No. The young businessman just did not want to enter into, as he himself put it, an empty relationship. The fact is that Anthony by nature has always been a very deep and loyal person, and he expected the same from his future mate. But it was not easy to meet such a girl, and he did not want to settle for less. And to tell the truth, Anthony now was not to love and romance. The business, recently given to him by his parents, had become a serious responsibility. He had to orientate himself literally on the fly, although his father tried to pass him the key parameters of the family business. However, as soon as Anthony took on the job himself, he immediately realized that the company needed a global overhaul. Much of what Mr. William practiced in his business has simply become outdated and required a complete revision of the basic concept of management. And the conduct of all internal processes of the firm parents meanwhile constantly pressed Anthony, especially his mother, Mrs. Annie. She certainly wanted to marry her son in the near future, and to a girl from some very famous and high-ranking family. Anthony, darling, are you sure you don't want to come with us to the golf club this weekend? Mrs. Annie asked meaningfully. The Cooper couple and their daughter will be there. Chloe is back from London this year. Yes, imagine that, she finished her undergraduate degree there. Now the girl's a Master of Arts. Sounds like a great fit for you. You should definitely take a look at her. There you go again. Anthony sighed heavily. I thought I made it clear to you and Dad that I'm not interested in a relationship just yet. And I certainly don't want to consider all sorts of options. You know I'm going to marry like a normal person. For love. and to someone of my own choosing. Anthony's son, Mum retorted indignantly. By the time you choose a wife, your father and I will be old enough. You're nearly 30, aren't you? It's time to start thinking about starting a family and having a home of your own. I realize you don't have much time. You're busy with the company, but we want to make it easy for you. Trust me, you can rely on your mum. I'll pick you a girl from the best family. Mum. I said no. Anthony exclaimed, feeling irritation coming on. You don't need to get involved in arranging my life. I can handle it just fine on my own. I see, Mrs. Annie said dryly. Do you want to leave us without heirs, to act like the ultimate selfish man? What if something suddenly happens to you? The woman began to sob, tears welling up in her eyes. If you get into an accident like your naughty brother and leave Daddy and me, do you think we can survive that? Do you think I can? Mrs. Annie began to sob loudly, and poor Anthony had to comfort her, apologizing for his intemperance. Mum, please calm down. Please don't worry so much about me. I was unforgivably rude to you. I apologize. It's just that you know how hard it is for me to work at Dad's company. This was all John's job to handle, Anthony said. Yeah, but he's gone, the woman said through tears. Now you, Anthony, are our last hope. I won't survive the death of another son. And of course I want you to have children, and I want Papa and me to have grandchildren, so that the stomping of little children's feet can be heard in our house again. Anthony held his mother tightly to him then, and could hardly comfort her. John was 2 years older than him, and had been preparing since he was a boy to lead his father's empire. Anthony had always admired the hard work and perseverance his brother put in to become a worthy leader. He studied very hard, constantly taking additional courses to learn skills that could be useful to him in business. But all this lasted exactly until John began to drink. It happened about a year ago. The older brother abruptly lost interest in everything, burned out and as if he didn't know where to put himself. When questioned by his parents, John every time answered evasively, saying that the vector of his interest in life had changed. But in what direction he changed, he did not specify. Instead, his brother closed himself in their home library with a bottle of whiskey and stayed there for hours, consuming one glass of alcohol after another. Anthony still held himself responsible for his brother's death. Maybe if they had sounded the alarm sooner, if they had thought about how to help him sooner, John would be alive now. Anthony instead tried to stay away from his brother, thinking that he was having an identity crisis and that John was old enough and self-sufficient enough to handle it on his own. As a result, his older brother just got behind the wheel drunk one day and crashed at breakneck speed into a train passing by on the railway. The investigation found that it wasn't a suicide. He simply fell asleep at the wheel because of the huge amount of alcohol drunk before the trip. Except that Anthony himself took this tragedy as a real sign from above. He sincerely believed that his brother was thus trying to ask him and his parents for help, but none of them heard him. Both he and his mother and father experienced this loss with great difficulty. Anthony even underwent several courses of psychotherapy, so difficult it was for him to cope with the pain tearing him from the inside. The young businessman could not come to terms with such a stupid and terrible death of his brother, so he admitted to himself that he also needed help and went to a specialist. John had been gone for 7 months. The subject of his death was still very painful for Anthony. The young man often came to the cemetery to his brother's grave and had long conversations with him, asking forgiveness for his then frivolity and unwillingness to see the problems. So when his mother, without realizing it, began to manipulate and pressure him through the image of his deceased brother, Anthony found it very difficult to contain his resentment and anger. He was already under a lot of pressure from his father, who controlled his every move. And then there was Mum and her marriage. That was partly why he had plunged into the business so eagerly, taking it entirely on his shoulders. When John was alive, Anthony did not think of becoming the head of his father's company. The guy dreamed of linking his life with art. The current businessman planned to open his own art gallery in the city and exhibit their young and promising artists, whose talent in the future could decorate the living room or hallway of the house of a famous person. Mrs. Annie and Mr. William often laughed at their youngest son on account of this. "Oh, Anthony, you're not like us in that respect," his father used to say to him. "You had better take a better example from your brother. He, John, is already running the branch proper. He's getting into our business thoroughly, so to speak. And you're all about the pictures. So maybe it's for the best," objected the son with a smile. "We already have one brother who is a businessman in our family. Let there be another brother, a gallerist known throughout the city. I'm not drawn, Papa, to all this business stuff of yours." "Oh, you shouldn't say that, son," answered the mother in Mr. William's stead. "We live in a world now where you can't live without a reliable business. What are you going to do with those paintings if nobody buys them? You could have used your skills more effectively at your father's firm. Did we pay all that money for your training for nothing?" Anthony clenched his teeth and said nothing. He couldn't explain to his mother his attraction to painting rather than to documents and endless financial reports. One way or another, he had to take over from John. And now he was learning the basics of management at a rapid pace every day, using his creative skills for the good of the family business. He would never get John back, no matter how hurt and offended Anthony and his parents were. As for getting married, he made it clear to his father and mother that he would not be in a hurry. "When the time comes, I will meet my true love, the girl I want to tie my life to," Anthony told his parents. "You will certainly be the first to know." He was still sitting behind the wheel of his car, looking out at the summer sun setting over the horizon. A warm breeze blew in through the open window, which brought the young man out of his reverie. The businessman was just passing over a wide motorway bridge that sprawled over a small river when he saw something strange. It seemed to Anthony that there was someone in the water, because the water surface was somehow unnaturally rising and falling. Looking around, he noted that none of the motorists were stopping. Anthony pulled over to the side of the road and walked out to the bridge railing. Taking a closer look, the young businessman realized he wasn't mistaken. There was a young girl in the water, a few meters below him, desperately fighting the current. "Damn it!" Anthony cursed to himself, and without thinking long enough, he threw off his shoes and jacket, and then dived after the unfortunate girl into the deepest part of the river. The water was murky, but the man quickly found the stranger going down, taking her under the armpits with one hand. Anthony began to row desperately to bring the drowning woman to the surface. The latter was not easy, for the current that the girl was trying to overcome was indeed so strong that it almost carried the businessman in the opposite direction. Anthony almost lost his orientation himself, but as he had trained a lot in the swim team at school, he was still able to cope with the water element and save her. When they managed to get ashore with great difficulty, the girl recovered a little and looked at her savior with gratitude. She slowly rose to her feet. Her clothes were soaked through, but she still managed to give the businessman a weak smile. "Thank you," she stammered out. "If it weren't for you, Bax and I would be completely lost." The businessman, who was trying to catch his breath at this time, looked with mute amazement at the girl. "With what, Bax?" he asked in an incomprehensible tone. Anthony thought at first that the poor fellow was a little lost from stress, but at that moment he noticed the girl clasping her hands to her chest. Only now, in the middle of the sandy bank under the bridge, there was a quiet and pitiful whimpering, and Anthony saw in the stranger's hands a tiny, 1-month-old puppy. "Is that what you went into the water for?" Anthony exclaimed with undisguised indignation. "Did you jump in after the puppy?" "Well, yes," nodded the girl, shivering with cold. "Some rascal threw him right in front of me into the water. Just took it out of my bag like that." The memory caused her to burst into another fit of tears. It was only then that Anthony noticed the girl's rounded belly protruding strongly from beneath her wet clothes. She was pregnant, and the term seemed to be quite advanced. "No. Are you out of your mind at all?" shouted the businessman at her, shocked. "Are you sick of living? What if all three of you had drowned? Okay, you don't think about yourself, but what's your child got to do with it?" The unfortunate woman modestly lowered her large light blue eyes and continued to hold and stroke the whimpering puppy. She herself was as pale as the first snow. When Anthony saw the girl's lips begin to turn blue, he realized that she was on the edge. It was impossible to get anything out of her in such a state. So Anthony decided to take her to his cottage so that she could warm up and come to her senses. "What's your name anyway?" Beatrice Morris," she answered, exactly as she had done in school. "All right, Beatrice," Anthony interrupted her, sighing. "Why don't you get in my car and I'll take you back to my place? I'll give you a hot cup of tea. You rest there and we'll see what you need to do next." She nodded briefly and got into the car. The puppy, of course, was still with her. Anthony shook his head, slammed the door behind him, and turned on the heater so she could dry off. Even though it was summer, but after the water and even pregnant, extra warmth would not hurt. The cottage where he was going to take Beatrice had once been their family home, but in the last couple of years only John had been going there. The young man explained to his younger brother that he went to the countryside to gain strength and relax from the hustle and bustle of the city. John could live at the cottage for weeks, and then come rested and fresh to plunge into the affairs of his father's firm with renewed vigor. However, before his death, his brother was not interested in even that. After John's departure, the cottage passed to Anthony, and he sometimes went there in memory of his brother. Mother and father could not bring themselves to go there. They had too many memories of the place in John's childhood. Besides, Anthony understood perfectly well he could not bring Beatrice to his home. Her parents simply wouldn't understand. A poorly dressed girl soaking wet, clutching a street puppy, and 8 months pregnant. It's not hard to imagine what thoughts would immediately pop into their heads. Anthony and Beatrice barely spoke a word during the whole journey. Beatrice was mostly silent and demure. Anthony kept his eyes on the road as it began to darken rapidly. Out of the corner of his eye, he glanced at the girl from time to time. Beautiful, fragile, with a mop of fluffy light brown hair. Beatrice could have been a true lady if it weren't for her poor clothes, obviously secondhand, and her noticeable thinness. They gave Beatrice away. If not a rich girl, then certainly not an ordinary one. Beatrice, as the businessman realized from their brief conversation, had been brought up in an orphanage and had been left to fend for herself for most of her own life. She had no relatives, and when asked if she had a husband or fiancé, she would not answer at all. "I'm not comfortable with the subject. I'm sorry," she explained to Anthony. The man did not insist and left the girl alone. When they reached the cottage, something strange happened. At the sight of John's house, Beatrice looked at Anthony with surprise, but did not say anything aloud. The businessman thought that she had never seen such large country houses, so he just nodded, trying to fumble in his pocket for the keys to the front door. "What the hell?" he muttered to himself, patting himself in all his pockets. "Where could I have put it?" "Have you lost something?" inquired the girl politely. "Yes, I lost the key. I guess when I was diving into the river after you," Anthony remembered exactly that he had the key in the breast pocket of his shirt. He always carried it there in case he needed to stop by the cottage. Finally, he shook his head dejectedly. "It can't be helped. I guess I'll have to climb through the window after all." Beatrice watched her rescuer closely, but when he was about to kick out the small window on the ground floor leading into the storeroom, the girl stopped the businessman. "Anthony, you needn't. Let me better open it with my key." Then Beatrice put the puppy on the opposite shoulder. He only squeaked in his sleep, and pulled out of her pocket a thin cord, on which was exactly the same key as the owner of the house. It was not a duplicate or a hastily made fake. Anthony could have sworn that the key was a genuine one. Beatrice turned it in the keyhole exactly 3 times, and then there was a distinctive click, and the door opened. "What is this?" Anthony recoiled from her in shock. "Where did you get that key from?" Beatrice looked at him completely calmly, then uttered, "Anthony, you just don't worry. Let us have tea with you and I'll tell you all about it." "I should like that very much," he replied gravely. Half an hour later, when the young people had brewed hot, fragrant herbal tea in their mugs, Beatrice confided, "Anthony, the thing is, I was John's fiancée before he died." "What?" The man couldn't contain his emotions. "How so? Why haven't we heard anything about you then?" The girl only grinned bitterly. "I was as poor as a church mouse. Can't you tell from me? John was afraid of the family's reaction, yours and your parents'. He said you were very protective of your reputation in the community. Who wants a daughter-in-law who lives virtually below the poverty line? It took Anthony a few seconds to realize what he had heard. Wait a minute. How did you meet him?" he asked. "John met me by chance and saved me," the girl explained, sighing. "I was standing outside the metro then, begging for alms, because nobody wanted to hire me. I couldn't even get a job as a cleaner." Beatrice stroked her backs, whom they had thoughtfully bought a carton of milk. The puppy was now sleeping peacefully on the mat, having drunk plenty of it. Some majors started harassing me. They wanted to take me away in their car somewhere. Obviously, when you have money, breaking the law is no problem. Beatrice's hands trembled at the memory of that day. And then John showed up. He ran out of nowhere and dispersed those bastards. That's how we met. We met at my flat. We loved each other very much. "And how long were you two together?" Anthony asked in amazement. "Almost a year," she replied, looking him straight in the eye. From that look, Anthony realized that Beatrice was not lying. She really was his brother's fiancée. So much for saving the girl with the puppy. John wanted to marry me, but he was afraid to tell my father about me. He thought he would disinherit him out of anger, Beatrice explained confusedly. At that moment, Anthony noticed how much she began to worry and clasped her own fingers. "Calm down, please," Anthony asked her quietly and covered her hand with his. "Tell me, did you know about my brother's addiction to alcohol?" Beatrice endured a long, questioning look from the businessman, after which tears glistened in her eyes. "Yes, but I really tried to stop him," the girl uttered, weeping. "He started drinking when I got pregnant. I couldn't think of a way to bring me to his house and introduce me to you. Because of that, basically, I'm the reason he died." Beatrice could not bear it and burst into tears, covering her face with her hands. "You can't blame yourself for his death." Anthony tried to soothe her. "No one is to blame for what happened to my brother. It just took me a long time to realize what happened to him, why he suddenly started drinking." The young businessman looked at his guest carefully. "But now I realize John was just ashamed of us. He was ashamed of us in front of you. My parents, and I guess I'm part snob. And my brother didn't want you to have to deal with that unnecessarily. Didn't want to hurt you and your child." Anthony leaned back in his chair in amazement. It finally made sense to him. The situation was clearer, but one thing the young man still couldn't understand. "Why didn't you come to us when John was gone? You must have needed help. And I understand money has been tight since your brother's death." Through sobs, Beatrice replied, "Well, what do you think? Look at me. I'm telling you I'm a beggar and I have a belly. How can you imagine it? Could I have come to your house and told you that John was almost my husband, that we wanted to get married? You'd have me thrown out of the door." Beatrice silently pointed to the key of the cottage. "John used to bring me here. He wanted to be outdoors with me. That's when he gave me this key. Said I could come here anytime I wanted. But of course I never came here when he wasn't around. I kept the key for some reason, probably in memory of him. I put it on my shoelace and now I wear it instead of a talisman." The girl gently stroked the key and smiled weakly. "Wow, who would have thought it could still come in handy?" Anthony was at a complete loss. Surely this girl could not be left in trouble, especially as she carried his own nephew under her heart. "Beatrice, listen," began the businessman. "Stay here to live for the time being. I will bring you and the baby all the necessary food, vitamins. Just don't go anywhere, please." Beatrice looked at him questioningly. "You won't bother anyone here," Anthony assured her. "I won't say anything to my parents just yet. They're not coming here themselves. You're right, I do need to think about how to break the news to them. But I want you to stay here until I can figure out how to bring you into the family. I'm sure they'll be happy to know they're about to have a grandchild. After all, they dream of him so much." Beatrice looked at him, and from the expression in her eyes, the man realized that she did not have much faith in the success of the undertaking. Yet the girl agreed. What was she to do? Not go back outside under the open sky. "All right," she said at last. I'll try to be quiet so the neighbors won't suspect anything." After that, she cooked her and Anthony an unpretentious dinner, and then the businessman drove back. From that moment, Anthony began to take care of Beatrice, coming to the cottage often and for a short time. He brought food, vitamins and fruit for the baby, and of course, food and treats for little Bax, whom Beatrice almost never let out of her hands. The most interesting thing is that the young businessman was not at all embarrassed by the girl's poverty. He felt that from her emanated inner energy and beauty. Anthony was amazed at her resilience and optimism. After all, Beatrice to the last waited and tolerated the indecision of his late brother in the hope that he still dared to go against the will of his parents and make Beatrice his lawful wife. Surprisingly, Anthony was comfortable around this brave girl. When he asked her age, he was greatly surprised to learn that Beatrice was only 23 years old. John was much older and therefore had to take full responsibility, except that for some reason he was never able to see it through. As it turned out, the older brother of the businessman was a determined and confident man only at work, but in his personal life became a victim of his own prejudices, no matter how sad it was to realize it, Anthony. At the same time, Mrs. Annie and Mr. William began to suspect that something wrong was going on with their son. More than anything, they feared that the same thing would happen to Anthony that had happened to his older brother. So they decided to find out as a matter of urgency what the younger one was hiding at their old cottage. What if he's drinking there too, like John? Or worse, Mrs. Annie sobbed. It doesn't look like it, shook his head Mr. William. Besides, Anthony wouldn't behave like that. He's even consulted a psychologist on the subject. He hasn't been able to stand the spirit of alcohol since his brother's death. There's no telling what might be the matter, exclaimed the wife. He doesn't drink today, and tomorrow John used to go there just the same. And what? No, let's go. My heart tells me we're in for a nasty surprise. That's said and done. Having once again followed their son, the parents went to the cottage at the moment when Anthony had already left Beatrice and the puppy. Upon reaching the place, the rich people witnessed a very strange and incomprehensible for them picture. A pregnant girl, very similar to a beggar, sat on the porch and chewed an apple. In addition, there was a flea-ridden puppy at her feet. Very interesting, speaking from the shadows, Mrs. Annie said. And what on earth are we doing here? In someone else's house? And Anthony's mother's voice was quiet, but it was the calm before the storm. With each successive word, the thunder in her intonation grew higher and higher, and threatened to become a shriek. Why is some beggar sleeping in my house? Who gave you the keys? Confess at once, you sly creature. Mrs. Annie's eyes blazed with righteous anger, and here not even Mr. William could stop her. You've got it all wrong, Beatrice tried to explain the situation to them. Anthony has given me permission to live here. I am pregnant by your eldest son, John. Beatrice's voice trembled, but she found the strength to tell the truth as it was. However, Mrs. Annie's face contorted into a grimace of terrible anger. What? What dare you say, you bitch? How dare you bring my boy into your fornication? John would never get mixed up with a pauper like you. You have no conscience. Annie, what are you getting so excited about? The old businessman tried to placate his wife. Young lady, you must really be better off leaving this house. The man looked expressively at Beatrice. Get out, you shameless girl, shrieked, as if exploding, Anthony's mother. Her exhortations were at that moment utterly uninteresting. Why do you do that, Mrs. Annie? Beatrice asked reproachfully. I did love your son. I miss him very much, just as much as you do. Out, shouted Mrs. Annie with all her might, so that the common people in the neighboring houses willy-nilly woke up and turned on the lights. Scandals were rare in their sleepy village, and at the country house of such rich people as the Harrisons. Crying with humiliation and resentment, Beatrice quickly gathered up her modest belongings, took Bax with her, and ran down the porch steps, disappearing into the darkness of the summer night. This was not the attitude she had expected to receive. So her dear John was right. He did have incredibly prejudiced parents. Perhaps we were wrong to be so cruel to the girl. Mr. William tried to intercede for Beatrice. Are you going to say anything more in her defense? Her spouse looked at him menacingly. The elderly businessman faltered and silently drove his wife back home. There they were met by an agitated Anthony, who had been fumbling with his phone for the third hour trying to reach his parents. "Mom, Dad, where have you been?" "I've already lost you." His son looked at them perplexed as they took off their shoes in the hallway. "Yes, son. I confess you disappoint me after all." The mother began slowly. "We've been to your cottage, the one you inherited from John." Anthony turned pale. He knew at once that his mother had found out about everything. "Ah, I see you've got some beggar woman and her dog living there," Mrs. Annie shrieked, and began to step slowly towards her son. "What have you done with Beatrice, Mum?" Anthony asked coldly. "What I had to do, I did. Kicked her out," replied his mother with a proud upturned chin. "Are you mad?" Anthony couldn't take it anymore. "She's in the last months of pregnancy. She could give birth at any moment." The young businessman began to argue with his mother, proving that this girl had everything to do with their family. However, Mrs. Annie only laughed in response. "Who are you listening to, son? Wake up. People like her would cheat anyone for a place to live and a piece of bread in the capital. Do you really think she could have been your brother's fiancée?" "She had a key to the house, Mum," the son explained to them, barely containing his anger. "And yes, I believe her. We talked to her a lot about her brother." Mrs. Annie squinted thinly, as if facing an attack. "You just don't understand anything," she hissed. "How do we know now that it is our John's child she is carrying under her heart? That girl could have been loved by anyone. And now I'm supposed to feed her and support her until she gives birth. Of course, when the baby's born, we can do a DNA test, but it's a long way off. In any case, I'm not going to go along with this liar." With these words, Mrs. Annie went to her room, and her father rushed after her, worried that his beloved wife's blood pressure might not spike. Anthony remained standing in the drawing room, tormented by feelings of embarrassment and guilt. He realized that Beatrice was telling the truth, and that his parents had thrown an innocent girl out on the street just before she gave birth. He tried to find his late brother's fiancée, but it was in vain. Beatrice seemed to disappear and did not answer the phone calls, which Anthony never tired to make in an attempt to get through to her. He had bought her a simple push-button phone so that he could always be in touch if she needed anything. But it had been over a fortnight and Beatrice still hadn't returned a single phone call. Anthony became worried when he remembered that she was about to give birth. After calling several maternity hospitals, the young businessman found the one where Beatrice was lying and hurried there at once. In the waiting room, Anthony called himself her fiancé in front of the doctors, all in order to get to her room. "I warn you, she's very weak right now," the doctor told him. "Your bride's foetus was very large. The woman in labor herself, on the other hand, is of rather frail build. Her pelvis is very narrow, so we had to do a cesarean. Beatrice lost a lot of blood, but luckily she and the baby are out of danger now." At these words, Anthony felt immediately relieved. Thanking the doctor, the businessman went to Beatrice. She was lying on the bed, very pale, paler than in their first meeting with Anthony. However, at the sight of the visitor, the girl smiled. "I didn't think I'd see you again." Anthony, her voice was very low and weak, but the lad could still hear everything well. He immediately jumped up to her. "I'm sorry about my mom and dad, Beatrice. I'm so sorry they kicked you out." She shook her head slowly. "You don't have to be. I understand it all. In their eyes, I'm a predatory con artist who wants a rich suitor by any means necessary. It's hard for them to believe John and I have feelings for each other." "They shouldn't have kicked you out," Anthony said, taking her gently by the arm. "I still can't get it into my head how they could have done that to you." Just then he felt the girl weakly squeeze his palm in return. "Thank you, Anthony, for your support and for everything in general." She gave the young businessman a long look, and at that moment he realized that he himself was ready to drown in those sky-blue eyes. Realizing that there was almost no one to take care of the child while his mother was recovering from a serious operation, Anthony tried to visit Beatrice more often. He hoped that she would recover faster if she felt care and warmth of heart. He carried to the maternity hospital everything necessary for the young mother and her baby. Food, nappies, medicines necessary for Beatrice and her nephew. Anthony did not spare any money, only if Alex, as the boy was named, and his mother would come back to normal faster. One day Anthony was summoned by the attending physician. From his concentrated face, the young businessman realized something unpleasant had happened. Alex has a heart defect. The surgeon began at once. The situation is extremely grave. If the infant is not operated on, he will not have long to live. Anthony was in shock. Is there nothing that can be done? And when do we have to do this operation? With all his strength, he asked. 6 months at the latest. We can't delay here in any case, replied the doctor. Any delay may cost your boy's life. Another thing is that the queue for free surgery may stretch for several months or even a year. But aren't newborns given a quota out of turn? Anthony looked at him doubtfully. They do, nodded the serious surgeon. But do you have any idea how many of these babies we have all over the country? Anyway, if I were you, I'd start preparing for the fact that you'll have to pay for the operation. The doctor voiced the amount needed for the surgery and subsequent rehabilitation of the baby. Without delay, Anthony agreed to pay for everything. If you need any help from me, I'm ready to do anything, the businessman fervently assured him. The surgeon suggested Anthony take compatibility tests as the uncle wanted to be a donor to the baby. But when a blood draw was done on little Alex, the unbelievable was revealed. The fact was that absolutely no blood relation was found between Beatrice and Anthony's son. So you mean to say that this boy is not related to me? Anthony asked the lab technician in amazement. Unfortunately, that is indeed so, replied the latter, and lowered his eyes. You have nothing in common with him. The businessman didn't know what to think. He didn't talk to Beatrice about anything. He just didn't understand how he should communicate with her now, after everything that had happened. What if his parents were right, and he had taken in a common rogue? And what to do with the feelings for Beatrice, which he was not at all ready to give up. I guess you were right, Anthony said to his mother. It was Beatrice who fattened her child somewhere, and then decided to fool our John with it. Anthony was ready to weep himself at such a betrayal. Is my brother dead because of her? But I feel sorry for her baby. That's what hurts. On learning that Beatrice's son had been diagnosed with a serious heart defect, Anthony's mother suddenly softened. She looked warily at Mr. William, who only nodded silently. You see, son, here's the thing, Mrs. Annie began in a trembling voice. I suppose we should have told you everything a long time ago, but we kept lacking the resolve. What is it? Anthony shifted his gaze anxiously from her to his father and back again. The fact is, said his mother slowly, that you don't know everything about your brother. Anthony felt his heart beat twice as fast. Mom? He looked at her questioningly. Just then Mr. William, who took pity on his spouse, entered the conversation. What Mama means to say, Anthony, is that John, though he was a son to us, was not related by blood. How do you mean? Stammering, the young businessman interrogated them. William and I have been unable to conceive for a very long time, Mrs. Annie said, wiping her eyes with her handkerchief, embarrassed. So we decided to take a baby from the orphanage. We picked out the one we thought looked the most like me and Daddy and brought him up. We loved John like he was our own. I swear. The mother clasped her hands to her chest. And then 2 years later we had you. But we never felt any difference between you, Father hastened to add. You were both loved by me and Annie quite alike. Now you know the whole truth. Anthony felt that the air in the room where they were sitting had suddenly come to an abrupt end. He had nothing to say to that, except to wonder how they could have kept the fact that John was their adopted son from him for so many years. That's what John himself asked for, Mr. William explained to Anthony. He didn't want you to see him as an outsider in the family. You were teenagers then, and he felt strongly about it. I don't believe my ears, said the son. Yes, I adored him, always admired him, and I could have cared less whether he was my own or not. Anthony felt his heart pounding with indignation. Mom, Dad, I understand, but I've always loved my brother, and that will never change. Anthony finally said, You should have told me everything at once. All these prejudices of yours. Look where they've brought us all. Anthony wasn't angry with his parents. He realized that they were not worried about Beatrice's son, because they knew perfectly well that this grandson was not their own. However, everything changed the moment Mrs. Annie found out that the baby was ill. Now that Anthony knew the truth, he could no longer worry about Beatrice's loyalty to his brother. After paying for the boy's operation, he continued to care for him and Beatrice. When the young mother was discharged from the hospital, Anthony immediately took her to his and his parents' mansion. There Beatrice could take care of the baby in peace. And Anthony himself and Mrs. Annie, tawed towards the little grandchild, began to actively help her. The funniest thing was that Bax, whom Beatrice, as it turned out, had given to one of her good friends, who lived in a small house on the outskirts of the city, before giving birth, moved to the mansion. Bax now had his own beautiful doghouse where he loved to hide and sleep, after playing rough with Anthony. Alex underwent surgery just a couple of months later, when the boy was strong enough for such manipulations to be performed on his heart. Beatrice was very worried about her son, but luckily the surgery was a success. And now Alex is a healthy baby boy like all other children. All this time, their first tender feelings were slowly developing between Beatrice and Anthony. Beatrice herself did not understand why this tall, blonde-haired man was causing her such excitement. Anthony was nothing like John. And yet, from the moment he had saved his life, the young mother felt that she was gradually falling in love with Harrison's youngest son. Anthony, on the other hand, was simply enjoying Beatrice's company, not hoping for more, although strong feelings were also raging in his heart. For the first time, he realized that Beatrice was the one with whom he wanted to tie his life. It took several more months before Anthony decided to ask Beatrice out on their first real date. The man was very nervous and generally acted like a boy in love, not knowing where best to ask her out. "Beatrice, let's go to the cinema," he suggested. "Gosh, it must be ages since I've been there," Beatrice replied, laughing happily, and gratefully accepted the bouquet of beautiful white roses Anthony had prepared for her. "If you like it, I promise we'll go there every week," he assured her fervently. The date went off just fine, and at the end of the evening, the young people did not hold back their feelings and finally joined in a tender and passionate kiss. Both had been waiting for this for too long, so they decided that they would no longer put their lives on hold, but would start loving and feeling again here and now. Another 6 months later, they had a beautiful, lavish wedding. Little Alex, sitting in his grandmother's arms, admired his beautiful mum, who seemed the happiest woman in the world that day. Anthony had never seen Beatrice so radiant and healthy. By that time, she had grown stronger and transformed herself from a poor haggard girl to a charming and slender lady. Beatrice easily coped with the role of mistress of the house and at social gatherings, where she sometimes had to go with her husband. She looked and behaved so dignified that Anthony's parents were involuntarily proud of her. The latter circumstance was only strengthened when a strange event occurred a year later. It happened on Christmas Eve. Beatrice received a very unusual letter in which a certain couple Bleck asked her for a personal meeting. Beatrice knew that she had a lot of competitors in the business, and to go to unknown people alone could be very imprudent and dangerous. After telling her husband all about it, she asked him to go to the meeting with her. "Sure, we'll go to see them that same weekend," her husband calmly agreed. When they arrived at the most fashionable hotel in the city, they were met in the lobby and escorted to a deluxe room. There, a handsome older couple was already waiting for Beatrice and her husband. They greeted her with hugs and tears and immediately told her who she really was. "How can it be that you are my mom and dad?" Looking at them perplexed, the woman asked, "I grew up in an orphanage, and I don't remember anything at all until I was 5 years old." The elderly lady, whose name was Mrs. Sherrill, merely wiped tears from the corners of her eyes. "That's the thing, sweetheart. You lived with us until you were 3, she said, shaking her head. "We were the happiest family. We had such a wonderful business." And then they decided, Beatrice's father, Mr. Harry, added, "They tried to take away your business." Anthony asked concernedly. "That's right," replied the elderly businessman. "We owned a large jewelry factory. Among other things, we were in the business of making amber jewelry. You see, amber was truly a deadly stone at that time. Any business where it appeared automatically became dangerous. Unfortunately, we were so naive and thought as if we wouldn't be affected the businesswoman continued. We thought that the law would be on our side, that we would be protected. But in the end, we had to defend ourselves against the law. Mr. Harry finished for his wife with a bitter smile. We had to flee, but it was very dangerous if we took Beatrice with us. So we decided to leave you here, entrusting you to Nanny. We didn't realize we would have to hide for so long. Beatrice looked at her parents sorrowfully. Then why didn't you take me away? We couldn't find you, exclaimed her mother. Nanny herself had to hide for a long time. The criminals tried in every possible way to get on her trail to take you away. They wanted to blackmail us with you, continued Mr. Harry. That poor woman found no better way out than to give you to an orphanage, her husband finished with bitterness in his voice. Your tracks were lost. And not only the bandits couldn't find you, but neither could we, Mrs. Sherrill said, touching her daughter's face with tenderness. But now, if you'll let us, we'll at least observe your life from afar. After all, we only found out you were alive because of your wedding, she added. When we saw your photos, we immediately realized it's you. The happy girl in the photo is our daughter. You're a carbon copy of me when you were young. Beatrice looked at her parents with love and understanding. You don't need to watch me from afar. I want us to always be close to each other now, Beatrice pronounced. I have missed so many happy years without you, and now I intend to make up for it. They embraced, and all four, including Anthony, shed many tears. Happiness. As it turned out later, Beatrice is the sole heiress of a huge and very rich jewelry house. The spouses of Bleck were able to keep a part of their business and now wanted to involve their only daughter in it. Beatrice, of course, agreed to become part of the business. But first she had to get the necessary education. Mrs. Annie, upon learning who her daughter-in-law really was delighted and assured her that she would help her with the baby while Beatrice received her training. After all, as it turned out, she and Anthony were of the same status, which meant that their family not only lost nothing, but gained a valuable asset in the form of Beatrice and her jewelry empire. God, if I had known my daughter had parents like that, I would never have said a word against her. The mother-in-law shook her head, chiding herself. Oh, Mom, you still have that drop of snobbery I told you about earlier, Anthony said with a slight chuckle as he folded the paper. Well, only if the very drop, his mother joked. But actually, I'm very glad Beatrice is going to be educated in the jewelry trade. Just imagine what the future holds for your children, she said dreamily and kissed Alex's silky hair. The most important thing, Mom, is that Beatrice has a good heart in the first place, Anthony replied.